Chapter 370. The door suddenly opened and Matsuda Taihei's subordinate, Sasuke, brought in 6 men. These men had the physique of sumo wrestlers, weighing at least 200 kilograms. They were naked from the waist up, and their lower bodies were covered with cloth. Their lower bodies were bulging as if they were going to jump out of the cloth at any time. Their faces were flushed and their eyes were filled with lust. They had lewd smiles on their faces and they couldn't wait to walk over to Mikakito and the others. Mikakito's eyes turned cold. She had guessed Matsuda Taihei's intention, because he had ordered Jiang Dao to use this trick on old K before. Matsuda Taihei was so excited by the mountains of flesh in front of him that he forgot that his calf was still in Mikakito's hands. His eyes were filled with fanaticism and he shouted, "In order to let you have more fun, I specially prepared a gift for you 2 brothers. It will be interesting to let you 2 brothers witness each other's lewd nature under a man's body." The guy named Sasuke slowly walked over with a syringe in his hand. The syringe was half filled with medicine. Needless to say, the syringe must be filled with powerful aphrodisiac. Matsuda Taihei suddenly thought of something and smiled wretchedly. "Oh right, if these 6 sumo wrestlers can't satisfy you, you 2 brothers can satisfy each other." Mikakito's fingers, which were hiding the blade, suddenly clenched. His body was filled with violence, but he didn't act rashly. Instead, he let Sasuke stab the syringe into his arm. The cold liquid slowly pressed down. Everyone's attention was on the syringe, including Matsuda Taihei. "Very good, this is the moment." Mikakito's hand that was holding Matsuda Taihei's calf suddenly pulled. Matsuda Taihei was caught off guard as his body heavily fell to the ground along with his pistol. Beitang Shin kicked the pistol as far away as he could at the fastest speed. At the same time, he threw the blade with his other hand and ruthlessly cut the throat of the bodyguard guarding Xuanhuan. Blood flowed out as the bodyguard heavily fell to the ground. "Quick, catch Mikakito!" Matsuda Taihei shouted as he lay on the ground. He crawled towards the gun that had fallen in the distance. The 6 brawny men were already impatient and rushed forward. Mikakito kicked away Sasuke, who was injecting her with the potion, and pulled out the syringe from her arm. She quickly glanced around with her cold eyes and flew in front of Xuanhuan. There were still 8 enemies alive. In addition to the gun that Matsuda Taihei kicked away, Sasuke also had a gun. When Sasuke got up from the ground and pulled out the pistol from his waist, Mikakito quickly dragged a chair and smashed it on his head. He rolled his eyes and fainted. The room was filled with the smell of blood, but the 6 men did not seem to notice it. They were already burning with lust, and their minds were filled with thoughts of how to push Mikakito to the ground. Beitang Shin pulled Xuanhuan and shuttled back and forth between the mountains of meat. Although the 6 people were fat, they were very agile and strong. Very soon, they smashed all the things in the room, such as tables and chairs, and chased after their prey. Mikakito's dodging seemed random, but in fact she was approaching the position of the pistol with Xuanhuan. The moment Matsuda Taihei's right hand touched the pistol, Mikakito stepped on his wrist and snatched the pistol from his hand. She raised her hand and shot the nearest brawny man to death. Bang! Bang! The gunshots came from the door. Suzaku and Jiang Dao were wearing black night clothes. Each of them had 2 pistols in their hands. They instantly killed the remaining brawny men. "Boss, sorry we're late." Jiang Dao strode over and pointed the pistol at Matsuda Taihei's head. "Boss, what about him?" "Don't kill me, don't kill me." Matsuda Taihei's right hand was stepped on by Mikakito. He had no choice but to lie on the ground. Mikakito increased the force of her foot and crushed his wrist. Crack! Matsuda Taihei's wrist was fractured and he screamed in pain. Mikakito stared at him coldly and said, "I've said before that I won't let anyone hurt Xuanhuan. If anyone dares to hurt her, there's only one outcome. Jiang Dao, I'll leave him to you. Clean him up and send his hands to Suzuki Chisakura. Tell her that if there's a next time, I won't give face to Xiao Bao." "Understood." Jiang Dao pulled Matsuda Taihei up from the ground. Ignoring his pleas for mercy, Jiang Dao smashed the back of his head with the pistol, knocking him out, and dragged him out of the basement. Only Mikakito, the 2 brothers, and Suzaku were left in the basement. The blood and gunshots constantly stimulated Xuanhuan's nerves. He was delirious, as if he had just been rescued from a dungeon. He shrank behind Mikakito in a daze, not saying a word. Suzaku's heart ached when she saw him like this. She clenched her fists and approached him. "Man, I'm with you. I'm taking you home." Xuanhuan raised his head and stared at her blankly. After a long time, his long eyelashes fluttered, and sparkling tears rolled down from his eyes. "Wuyu, she's dead. Xiaoqing is dead. I killed her." Xiaoqing was the mute girl who was in love with Xuanhuan. She wanted to call the police to save Ayuan and the others, but she was discovered by the bodyguards. Su Murong killed her with her own hands, then had her head chopped off and thrown into Ayuan's room. Ayuan witnessed all of this at that time, so he had a mental breakdown. Today's shooting scene brought back all of his memories. He remembered all of his tragic past, and also remembered the tragic death of his lover. His mind was filled with dark and dirty memories. His face was pale and he was lifeless. He had lost all of his vitality. Suzaku's heart ached so much that she almost couldn't breathe. She hugged him tightly and said hoarsely, "Ayuan, it's not your fault. Xiaoqing loves you. She wants you to be happy. Ayuan, pull yourself together. You can do it." His thin shoulders trembled violently. He buried his head in her chest like a pitiful little animal, whimpering softly. He was so sad that he couldn't control himself. "Ayuan, no matter what happens, you still have me and my brother. We will always be by your side." Suzaku patted his back gently and said softly, "Ayuan, do you still remember the promise we made when we were young? We promised to grow up together and see the outside world together. We could go see the cherry blossoms on Mount Fuji, listen to the music by the Seine River, enjoy the scenery of the lakes and mountains in Switzerland, and experience the scenery of the Sahara Desert." Her voice was slightly hoarse as she described the beautiful scenery in a soothing tone. Her eyes were filled with tears, but there was a warm smile on her lips. She was like the sun that dispelled the haze in the basement and ironed Ayuan's cold and desperate heart. She also let Mikakito see a different side of her. At this moment she was no longer the cold killer Suzaku. She was just a very ordinary little girl who was looking forward to the future. Ayuan had unknowingly stopped sobbing. He lifted his tear-stained face from her arms and smiled at her. In an instant the room was filled with beauty. Mikakito wanted to say something, but his body suddenly felt very uncomfortable. His whole body became boiling hot, as if he was being burned by high temperature. His abdomen was ignited with a ball of fire that was spewing towards a certain part of his body. He frowned and glanced at the syringe that he had thrown on the ground. Nearly a third of the liquid was gone, but it did not affect the efficacy of the syringe. "Let's go back." As soon as he opened his mouth, he frowned because of his lustful voice. Suzaku had already noticed his abnormality and stepped forward. "What's wrong with you? Your face is abnormally red." His heart was beating very fiercely in his chest, and his senses were even more sensitive. He even felt that the faint fragrance emitted from her body was very alluring, and her moist big eyes almost made him sink into them. Her slightly hoarse voice was also extremely charming, and her exquisite figure made his blood boil even more. Her entire body was emitting a fatal charm. Baitangshin knew that it was the effect of the medicine. He gritted his teeth and tried to control himself. "Don't come near me. Inform Uncle Hanzo that they have injected me with an aphrodisiac." This basement was Matsuda Taihei's private residence. Suzaku called Jiang Dao in and helped Mikakito to the room upstairs to wait for Miyamoto Hanzo to arrive. Mikakito thought that he could rely on his own willpower to hold on until Miyamoto Hanzo arrived. He did not expect that although the drug took effect late, it was very effective. His situation was very dangerous. His whole face had turned purple. He was lying in the bathtub, soaking in cold water. His erect part was bulging and the veins on it were throbbing. No one dared to look directly at him. Outside the door, Suzaku lowered her voice and urged Miyamoto Hanzo. "Uncle Hanzo, how much longer will it take for you to arrive?" Miyamoto Hanzo sat in the back seat of the car. He did not look anxious at all. "Hey Xiaokei, it's very far from my house. It'll take at least half an hour." Suzaku could not help but roll her eyes. She gritted her teeth and said, "When you arrive, you can only collect Mikakito's corpse." "Then I have no choice. I've already asked the driver to drive the car at the speed of a plane. Speaking of planes, I should have taken a helicopter just now. It would definitely be much faster. But the problem is that there are no landing points around." Suzaku's facial muscles twitched. This old man. Why was he still nagging at a time like this? She suppressed her anger and interrupted him. "What do we do now? Other than cold water, is there any other way to relieve the pain?" "Of course there is." Miyamoto Hanzo blurted out. "Xiaokei, as long as you sacrifice a little, you can save Ashin. An old man like me won't have to work so hard." The vermilion bird was slightly startled. Then, her face was filled with anger as she roared, "Damned old man, don't tell me you didn't rush with all your might because of this idea?" Awesome Novel Songshu 566. Chapter 371. How could that be? The old man is working very hard on his journey. That was close. This girl had almost seen through his plan. Miyamoto Hanzo patted his chest and said seriously, "Of course there is another way. Jiang Dao can sacrifice himself." Suzaku was so angry that she almost threw her phone. Jiang Dao sacrificed himself? How could he say that? Even if Jiang Dao was willing, Mika Kito would kill Jiang Dao when he woke up. Of course she couldn't sacrifice herself. But, when she quietly opened the bathroom door and found Mika Kito soaked in cold water, he was almost unconscious. Her firm belief started to waver. What concept of chastity? To her it was like floating clouds, just a thin layer of film. She gave it to him, then so be it. Just treat it as if she was pricked by a needle or bitten by a dog. Her trembling fingers fell on his bare skin, and as if he was struck by lightning, he suddenly trembled. His slightly closed eyes suddenly opened, and his originally dark eyes were already dyed with a layer of scarlet red from desire. His gaze was fierce, like a hungry beast that had found its prey. That dangerous gaze made Suzaku tremble uncontrollably. She subconsciously retracted her hand, but it was too late. He had completely lost his mind. He suddenly grabbed her right hand that was about to retract and pulled her into the huge bathtub. His muscular body pressed down on top of her. His continuous movements were too fast. Suzaku was no match for him. Moreover, she didn't even think of struggling. She was directly pressed into the bathtub. Her head was pressed into the cold water, and it was so uncomfortable that she almost suffocated. She waved her arms helplessly and held onto his neck. Using the strength of his body, she pulled her head out of the water. She opened her mouth and gasped for breath. Her beautiful eyes were watery and looked very lovable. The water slowly flowed down her beautiful neck and flowed over her towering softness. It aroused the desire of the man who was already burning with desire. Mika Kito's hot palm landed on her body and quickly tore all the clothes that were in the way into pieces. Rags were thrown all over the place and soon the two of them were naked. He had already lost his mind. Without any foreplay, he entered her body in the most direct manner. Her body felt like it was being torn apart. Suzaku groaned and bit her lips. The bright red blood slowly seeped into the water from where the two of them met. He was violently thrusting inside her body. Water splashed out of the bathtub and flowed everywhere. Her tears rolled down and her watery eyes stared blankly at a certain spot on the ceiling. She bit her lips and let out a painful moan. Perhaps it was because her current expression was too similar to a certain person, but Beitang Shin's eyes gradually regained a trace of clarity. He slowed down his movements as he kneaded and ground with his hands. An unfamiliar feeling of soreness spread out from a certain place. Her mind gradually lost its clarity as she sank along with him like duckweed in the water. She didn't know how much time had passed. She was so tired that her body was limp, but he was still tirelessly teasing her. He dragged her from the bathtub to the bed. Their wet bodies were entwined together, moving up and down. She vaguely heard him holding her and calling a woman's name over and over again. It was the name of a woman he loved deeply. Under the dual effects of drugs and love, Mika Kito didn't wake up until the next afternoon. He found himself lying on an unfamiliar bed. He was wearing dry clothes and had been wiped clean. But as a grown man he knew what had happened last night. Miyamoto Hanzo didn't make it. He had sex with a woman. Although he couldn't remember who that woman was, he could easily guess her identity because there was no other woman in this villa with him last night except for Suzaku. His brows furrowed tightly as he sat silently on the bed for a long time, until there was a knock on the door. "Ashin, are you awake?" Mika Kito closed his eyes. After a while, he slowly opened them and said calmly, "Come in." Miyamoto Hanzo pushed the door open and entered. He was holding a glass of water and 2 pills. He walked to the bed with a smile on his face. "Ashin, this is the medicine to remove the remaining poison in your body. Quick, take it." Mika Kito took the pills expressionlessly. He drank a mouthful of water and swallowed them. "Where is Suzaku?" Miyamoto Hanzo coughed and chuckled. "That girl has already brought Ayuan back to the villa." Mika Kito pinched his forehead. Although it was hard to say, he still chose to ask. "Is she okay?" Miyamoto Hanzo shrugged. "To be honest, she's not very good. When I saw her today I was shocked. Her face was as pale as a snowman and she wasn't in good spirits. This is the first time I've seen her so weak." Mika Kito's frown deepened. Although he couldn't remember clearly, he knew very well that under the influence of the strong aphrodisiac, he must have done something to hurt her. His mind was in a mess. Miyamoto Hanzo's medicine was very effective. On the way back to his villa, Mika Kito had already returned to normal. His mind was gradually clearing up and an idea was slowly forming in his mind. The sun was setting and the temperature outside was still very high. The cicadas in the trees were chirping, making people who couldn't bear the heat feel irritated. Suzaku sat in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and leaned lazily on the soft cushion. She held a book in her hand and slowly read the story in it. Ayuan sat opposite her. He held his head in his hands and looked at her quietly. As she read, her thoughts drifted somewhere and she suddenly stopped. She stared absent-mindedly at the densely packed words in the book. Wu Yu, Ayuan waved his hand in front of her and called her name. She suddenly came back to her senses and smiled. What's wrong? Ayuan looked at her worriedly. Wu Yu, you're a little strange today. Is there something on your mind? Ever since what happened last night, Ayuan had become much more normal. Although he hadn't completely let go of the past, he no longer refused to face it. His words and actions had also started to behave like an adult. Suzaku shook her head. Nothing. Ayuan pursed his lips and said seriously, since you don't want to say it, then I won't force you. However, I'm your friend. If you have any difficulties, you must tell me, okay? She smiled. Okay, I got it. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. It was Mika Kito's voice. Suzaku, let's talk. Suzaku's eyes flickered slightly, but she didn't answer. Ayuan smiled. It's brother. He seems to be looking for you. I'll go out first. He walked to the door and opened it. He saw Mika Kito standing at the door calmly. He smiled brightly. Brother, you're back. Suzaku is inside. You can go in. Mika Kito patted his shoulder. Only the two of them were left in the room. Mika Kito looked at the woman sitting opposite him. She looked normal and looked at him calmly. What do you want to talk about? He said calmly, take some time out. I'll go visit Director Lin with you. Suzaku looked at him in surprise. What are you doing? His eyes flickered slightly and his voice became gentle. I know that in your heart, Director Lin is your mother. Naturally, we should get her approval for our marriage. Suzaku's fingers dug into her palms. She suddenly burst out laughing. Mika Kito, are you serious? You can't take it? Let's just treat it as a one-night stand. We're both willing. Don't take it to heart. Mika Kito's eyes darkened. I'll take responsibility for what I've done, he said in a deep voice. She stood up in annoyance and glared at him condescendingly. I've said it before. I don't need you to take responsibility. Besides, I used to have many men. If all of them wanted to take responsibility for me, it wouldn't be your turn. He stood up abruptly, exuding a cold aura. His lips were pursed. Must you use such words to humiliate yourself? After spending so much time with her, he knew very well what kind of woman she was. Moreover, he had investigated her before and knew that she was very clean when it came to relationships. Suzaku snorted. That's my business. I don't need you to tell me what to do. Anyway, you just need to be clear about one thing. You don't need to take responsibility for me and I won't marry you. She seemed to think that her words weren't harsh enough. She glared at him and said, even if you don't despise me, I'll despise you. I won't want a second-hand good like you. You, Mika Kito's anger swelled. He clenched his fists tightly and glared at her. After a while, his anger gradually subsided and he said calmly, do you think I'll change my mind just because you're trying to provoke me? Don't be naive. Suzaku pursed her lips and said coldly, even if I despise you, you won't mind? Mika Kito, you're too cheap. As soon as she said that, she felt a grip around her waist and was pulled into his arms. His arms were like iron pincers, confining her body tightly. His eyes were burning with anger and he had the urge to strangle her to death. I admit that there's someone else in my heart. But since I've decided to marry you, I'll try to forget it. You'd better not provoke me again. She stared into his eyes calmly and said indifferently, why? A marriage without love is painful for both parties. I don't love you. His deep eyes were turbulent. His thin lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. He just slowly let go of her. Mika Kito opened the door. Miyamoto Hanzo, who had been eavesdropping at the door for a long time but didn't hear anything, quickly straightened up. He smiled and put his arm around Mika Kito's shoulder. He dragged him to the end of the corridor and said in a low voice, Shin, how did your talk go? Mika Kito's face was ashen. Uncle Hanzo, you seem to be meddling too much. Miyamoto Hanzo's old face was full of smiles. I don't say that. The old man is very sad. Shin, after your father passed away, I've been worried about your personal problems. It's not easy to meet a good girl. Don't let her go. Welfare Songshu 566. Chapter 372. Mika Kito's face darkened, and it was obvious that he refused to answer. Ayaya, don't be so cold. Just reveal a little, Mikakito's face darkened even more and the corners of his mouth twitched. Uncle Hanzo, you're too free. Miyamoto Hanzo rolled his eyes, and his goatee perked up. It's okay if you don't want to tell me. I'll ask Suzaku. Mikakito pinched the space between his eyebrows and said helplessly, I proposed marriage but she rejected me. Why is that? Hanzo Miyamoto rubbed his chin and looked at him from head to toe. Apart from being a little cold and a little taciturn, you are full of shining points. Why did Koka reject your proposal? Mikakito's facial muscles twitched uncontrollably. Miyamoto Hanzo did not expect to get an answer from him. He patted him on the shoulder and encouraged him. Ashin girls need to be wooed. You have to treat Suzaku better and use a few more tricks to woo girls. You'll definitely win her over. Mikakito did not take his words to heart. To Mikakito, marrying Suzaku was just a responsibility. If she was really unwilling, he would not force her. Miyamoto Hanzo watched as Mikakito's proud back disappeared down the stairs. He stroked his beard thoughtfully. It seemed like there was no hope for him to win over Suzaku with that blockhead Ashin. He still needed him to play the matchmaker. Hihi Inuanuan, Miyamoto Hanzo smiled wretchedly as he sneaked into Hiroshi Kitato's room and patted him on the shoulder. Ayun was shocked. Uncle Hanzo, why are you smiling so strangely? Is it strange? I don't think so. That's not the point. The point is that Uncle has something to ask of you. Ayun asked him to sit down. Oh, what's the matter? Miyamoto Hanzo stared at Ayun. Ayun, what do you think of Suzaku? Ayun said seriously, she's very good. Miyamoto Hanzo smiled like an old fox. Do you have any objections if I make her your sister-in-law? Ayuan's eyes widened. You're saying to bring my brother and Warriorless together? He stretched out his left thumb and then stretched out his right thumb. Bring the two of them together? Yes. Miyamoto Hanzo smizes. Hanzo hiss. He and Wuyu were good friends, but Wuyu became his sister-in-law. It seemed a little strange. What's strange? Miyamoto Hanzo stared at him suspiciously. Don't tell me you like Suzaku? He quickly waved his hand. No, Wuyu and I are just friends. That's right. Miyamoto Hanzo patted his shoulder and said, think about it. You and Wuyu are good friends. If Wuyu becomes your sister-in-law, she definitely won't mind that you and Shen have a close relationship. Then she won't cause any discord between you and Shen. But if Shen marries an ugly, fierce and petty woman, she'll definitely mind that Shen treats you well and cause a lot of family conflicts. Do you understand what I'm saying? Ayuan's frown deepened. He nodded and then shook his head. It's not as exaggerated as you say, right? Miyamoto Hanzo knocked on his head in exasperation. Why not? Many TV dramas are like this. The older brother is too good to the younger brother and always helps the younger brother out, causing the sister-in-law to be unhappy and quarrel with each other. If Wuyu becomes your sister-in-law, there won't be such a situation. What do you think? Think about it. Yuan? Ayun couldn't stand his nagging. He clasped his hands together and said, Okay, I understand. Uncle Hanzo, I agree. What a good child. Miyamoto Hanzo patted his shoulder and smiled mysteriously. Next, I'll need your help. Before dinner, Miyamoto Hanzo went back home. Only Mikakito and the other two were left in the villa. After the maid prepared dinner, she invited the three of them downstairs to eat. Suzaku didn't have much of an appetite and didn't want to eat, but she was worried that it would cause unnecessary misunderstandings, so she changed her clothes and went downstairs. Mikakito and Hiroshi Kitato were already sitting at the dining table. She greeted them and sat down at her seat. Ayun smiled as he scooped a bowl of chicken soup and placed it in front of Suzaku. Wuyu, you don't look too good today. Maybe it's because you were too tired yesterday. Drink more chicken soup to nourish yourself. The speaker didn't mean it, but the listener understood. Mikakito's eyes moved. She tightened her grip on her chopsticks and her deep gaze fell on Suzaku. Suzaku quietly lowered her eyes and smiled. Okay, thank you. She gently stirred the chicken soup and scooped a spoonful into her mouth. Her delicate lips curved slightly as she looked up and smiled at Ayun. It's delicious. Right? I specially asked the servant to make this for you. Ayuan's eyes sparkled with joy. He looked like an innocent child who gave his candy to his friend to make her happy. Suzaku's smile widened and her eyes sparkled. I see. Thank you so much. Ayun grinned. He scooped another bowl of soup and placed it in front of Mikakito. He chuckled and said, Brother, you were stabbed by a bad guy with a syringe when you tried to save me yesterday. Must be very painful. Drink some soup to nourish yourself. Mikakito calmly retracted her gaze from Suzaku and smiled. Okay. Will you eat this? It's delicious. Will you let me help you remove the fish bones? Ayun served Suzaku with a bright smile. Suzaku reciprocated his courtesy by picking up food and scooping soup for him. Mikakito saw their enthusiastic interaction. Ayun suddenly leaned closer to Suzaku and stared at the corner of her mouth with his beautiful eyes. She was stunned. What's wrong? It's nothing. He reached out to wipe the corner of her mouth and smiled. There's something on it. She smiled. Thank you. In her heart, she and Ayun were good friends. It was nothing to be intimate with him. However, a certain someone didn't think that way. Before Ayun recovered, Mikakito wouldn't think too much about it. But now that Ayun's mind was clear, even a fool could see how good and considerate he was to her. Mikakito couldn't help but wonder if Ayun had special feelings for Suzaku. For example, he liked her. Thinking of this possibility, he felt a little uncomfortable. After all, he had just had intimate contact with her last night. He was a little conflicted, and it was hard to explain why he was unhappy. Mikakito put down his chopsticks and went upstairs without saying a word. Suzaku also put down her chopsticks. Ayun glanced at Mikakito's back as he left, and then glanced at Suzaku beside him. He frowned and sighed. Wuyu, what do you think is wrong with my brother? Suzaku said calmly, he should be fine. He looks normal. Ayun shook his head. No, he's not normal. He didn't say a word tonight. His eyes lit up and he stared at her mysteriously. He lowered his voice and said, Wuyu, is my brother jealous? Jealous? Suzaku was surprised. Jealous of what? Jealous of who? Ayun touched her hair and sighed. Silly, of course he's jealous of you. I'm guessing that my brother likes you. Ayun, are you talking in your sleep? Suzaku couldn't help but laugh. She hadn't heard such a funny joke in a long time. Mikakito liked her? Ayun puffed up his cheeks and said sadly, I'm telling the truth. Zhu retracted her smile, patted him on the shoulder and said seriously, Ayuan, your brother has someone he likes in his heart. Don't associate me with him in the future. Ayuan stared into her eyes. Wuyu, do you like my brother? Vermilion Bird faintly smiled. I don't like it. You're lying. Ayun shouted unhappily. My brother is so good. Why don't you like him? Suzaku was amused by his childish words. Ayun, you're too young to understand relationships. I don't have to like someone just because he's good. Ayuan's face darkened. I'm 1 year older than you. But your mental age is younger than mine. Suzaku didn't give him any face. Mikakito noticed that Ayun and Suzaku were getting closer and closer. He often saw the two of them snuggling on the sofa and watching cartoons. Both of them were hugging pillows and laughing like children. He suddenly realized that Suzaku looked very good when she smiled. Her eyes were beautiful to begin with. Every time she smiled, they would curve into crescent moons. There was a hint of charm in her innocence. When she was with Ayun, she was casual and cheerful. However, in front of him, she still had a cold expression. This made him guess that she actually liked Ayun. Ayun liked her and she liked Ayun. The two of them were like an intimate couple. His existence seemed to be a little redundant. However, Ayun didn't know that he and Suzaku had been intimate. If he knew, would he dislike her? Would she blame him as her elder brother? Mikakito's brows furrowed into a chuan shape. He was getting more and more frustrated. Brother? Ayun suddenly pushed open the door and interrupted his thoughts. What's wrong? Mikakito saw that he was holding the skull in his hand. Ever since he regained his consciousness, he rarely saw him holding it. Ayun sat on the fabric sofa opposite him and stroked the skull with his fingers. He seemed to have made a great decision. He bit his lips and said, I want Xiaoqing to be buried in peace. Only then could he truly let go. Mikakito was very happy for him. The corners of his lips curled up. Okay, I'll arrange it. His clear eyes sparkled as he grinned. Thank you, brother. Only Xiaoqing's head was left. She was also buried in Qingshan's spirit garden. After Mikakito and Suzaku bid farewell to her body, they left Ayun some private space. The two of them walked one after the other under a cherry blossom tree. Mikakito suddenly turned around and looked at Suzaku with a deep gaze. He said in a deep voice, Did you refuse to marry me because of Ayun? At Songshu 566. Chapter 373. Vermilion Bird was slightly taken aback. She glanced at Ayun in the distance and said calmly, No. Mikakito pursed his lips. Ayun is very innocent. Don't let him get hurt. Don't tell him about us. Suzaku felt as though something had pricked her heart. She looked at him quietly. I've said it before. It has nothing to do with Ayun. You don't have to worry that I'll lead him astray. Mikakito looked upset. He didn't mean it that way. He only wanted to let her be with Ayuan, but he was afraid that Ayuan would mind their relationship. That was why he asked her to hide it from Ayuan. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. I'm taking the day off. She glanced at him and turned to leave. He suddenly said, "Wait a minute." She turned to look at him. He pursed his lips. "That's not what I meant." She looked calm. "What?" He was a little annoyed and frowned. "Forget it. It's nothing. You can go." She nodded casually. "Help me tell Ayuan." That night, Vermilion Bird returned home very late. A luxurious car drove her downstairs, and a handsome blonde man came down from the driver's seat and helped her out from the passenger seat. She was like a puddle of mud leaning on the handsome man's arms, with an intoxicated smile on her face. Mikakito stood in front of the window on the second floor and watched coldly as the blonde man helped her press the doorbell. Then he heard the sound of the servant welcoming Suzaku in. She heard the sound of stumbling footsteps and the servant's worried voice. "Miss Suzaku, please be careful. There's a staircase here." Suzaku was tall more than 1.7 meters. In comparison, the maid who was supporting her only reached her shoulders. The petite maid was tired and worried. She was afraid that Suzaku would fall down. It was not easy for her to help her to the corridor on the second floor. She was already sweating. "Oh!" The maid heaved a sigh of relief. She suddenly raised her head and saw a tall figure standing in the corridor. She hurriedly called out respectfully, "Eldest young master." Mikakito looked calmly at Suzaku, who reeked of alcohol. Suzaku's head was drooping and she was leaning on the maid. She looked very drunk. The maid could not bear the burden and was panting. He slowly approached them and grabbed Suzaku's arm. He abruptly pulled her away from the maid and into his arms. He said indifferently, "I'll send her back to her room. You should go and rest." The maid bowed respectfully. "Yes, young master. Good night." Suzaku was extremely disobedient. She moved her body and giggled foolishly. He did not know what she was mumbling. Mikakito knew how much she could drink. She must have drunk a lot to be so drunk. There was an inexplicable anger in his heart. She was drunk and alone. Didn't she know that this was very dangerous? Who was the blonde man who sent her back just now? She staggered and almost fell. Fortunately, he held her slender waist firmly and pulled her up. She was pressed tightly against his chest. She looked up in confusion and mumbled incoherently, "You? Who are you?" His face was ashen. He held her with one hand and pinched her chin with the other, forcing her to look directly at him. He squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. "Take a good look at who I am." Her starry eyes were slightly open and her delicate brows were slightly furrowed. She looked like she was thinking hard. She smiled foolishly and said, "You're Ayuan?" Mikakito had the urge to throw her away. She wrapped her arms around his neck and pouted her red lips. She said pitifully, I feel terrible. I feel terrible here." She pointed at her chest. "My head hurts too." Mikakito's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He said angrily, "Who told you to drink so much? It would be strange if your head didn't hurt." He simply carried her up horizontally and threw her onto the bed. She rolled on the bed in a daze, her hands pulling at her clothes. She was wearing a V-neck black off-shoulder t-shirt and high-waisted jeans. Her t-shirt was lifted up by her, revealing the graceful lines of her waist. Her fair skin glowed with a healthy luster under the soft light. She took off her shirt and threw it off the bed. The black bra wrapped around her chest and her soft pink peaks were perky. Her cleavage was faintly discernible and her fullness was on the verge of bursting out. Mikakito's face twitched uncontrollably. This damned woman. Did she think that he was dead? He quickly pulled up a thin blanket and covered her body. She frowned impatiently. Her fingers touched the zipper of her jeans and pulled it open. She moved her slender waist and took off her pants. She reached out from under the blanket and threw her pants off the bed. Her movements were too big. The blanket on her body was lifted to one side, revealing her fair and slender legs, her flat and tight stomach, and half of her black panties. Perhaps it was because of the alcohol, her whole body was hot. Her exposed skin felt the cold air of the air conditioner, and it was incomparably comfortable. She still felt that it was not enough, and threw the blanket covering her upper body to the side. Her right hand reached behind her back, and it seemed that she was going to unbutton her bra. Baitangshin was a little stunned. His face darkened even more. He quickly pulled the blanket over and covered her body again. "Let go. It's hot." Suzaku moved her body unconsciously. Her charming face had a languid and flirtatious look that was unique to drunk people. Mikakito's body stiffened. A blurry image uncontrollably appeared in his mind. He was panting heavily and sweating profusely. The woman under him was moaning coquettishly like a puddle of spring water. His Adam's apple bobbed. Blood gushed down his throat. He wrapped her up like a dumpling with a blanket. His voice was slightly hoarse. "Stay still. Don't move. It's hot." Her starry eyes opened slightly. She looked at him blankly with her watery eyes and pursed her red lips. "I'm hot." His body tensed up and his deep eyes became even more serene, intertwining with something that no one could understand. He clenched his fists tightly and suddenly stood up. He strode out of her room and slammed the door shut. Standing in the empty corridor, he placed his right hand on his chest. His heart was beating rapidly in his chest. His eyes gradually regained clarity. He told himself that he was a normal man. It was normal for his blood to surge when he saw that scene. "Good morning." Suzaku rubbed her aching head and slowly walked down the stairs. The two people in the dining room looked up at her at the same time. Hiroshi Kito had a bright smile on his face. "Will you good morning?" Mika Kito didn't look too good. He glanced at her indifferently, then lowered his eyes and focused on the breakfast on his plate. A faint fragrance wafted into her nose. She sat beside him. The maid placed her breakfast in front of her and placed a bowl of hangover soup. "Miss Suzaku, this is the hangover soup that second young master instructed me to make." Suzaku politely thanked her. Then she smiled at Ayuin, who looked concerned. Ayuin asked, Why did you drink so much last night?" Mika Kito paused. He seemed to be waiting for her answer. Suzaku shrugged nonchalantly. "It's rare for me to have some free time, so I went to the bar to relax." Mika Kito asked indifferently, "Who was the man who sent you home last night?" Suzaku raised her eyebrows. "I don't remember." When she felt that she was drunk, she grabbed a man from the bar and asked him to send her home. She didn't know the man's name. Mika Kito's eyes flashed. His voice deepened. "How dare you sit in a stranger's car?" She looked at him in amusement. "Do you think anyone would dare to do anything to me?" He retorted sarcastically, "Who was the one who was drunk last night? Even if I sold you out, you wouldn't realize it." She said indifferently, "You don't have to worry about me." Beitang Shin's fist had landed on cotton. He was so angry that he almost died. The fire in his heart was raging. He glared at her and gritted his teeth. "I'm your superior. I have the right to control you." She glanced at him indifferently. "Even if you're my superior, you can only control my work. You don't have the right to control my private life." She stood up and said slowly, "I don't think it's suitable for me to stay here anymore. I'll move out today." What was this? Was she drawing a line between herself and him so that she could pursue her private life? Mika Kito's deep eyes were like a storm. He clenched his fists so tightly that the veins on the back of his hands were throbbing. He said coldly, "From the moment you sign the agreement with me, you're my subordinate. You have to listen to my orders, whether it's for personal or private matters. I order you not to move out." Suzaku looked at him calmly with a trace of pity in her eyes, as though she was looking at an unreasonable child. Her red lips moved and she said indifferently, "If you want to use the agreement to bind me, I have nothing to say. Boss, I'm full. Do you have any orders for me now?" Deep down she was an arrogant person. Even when she was forced to work for him, she had never used honorifics. But now she was using honorifics to him. Mika Kito's cold gaze was like a sharp knife stabbing into her body. But she didn't feel anything. She stood a few meters away from him calmly and said slowly, "If you don't have any orders for me, I'll go upstairs first." She even bowed respectfully to him. Mika Kito was so angry that he threw the coffee cup beside him. The coffee cup rolled to her feet and the coffee spilled all over the floor. It even splashed onto her trousers. She didn't care at all. She bent down and picked up the coffee cup with a humble attitude. She walked a few steps forward and put it back on the table. She smiled faintly and turned to go upstairs. His expression became colder and colder. His gaze was fierce like a violent lion staring at its prey. He walked out of his territory step by step. Ayuin carefully glanced at Mika Kito's ugly expression and said softly, "Onie-san, you look so scary right now." Beitang Shin's body suddenly trembled. What was he doing? Towards subordinates who didn't listen to him, he would always directly kick them out of the Yamaguchi-gumi. There was no need for him to waste time getting angry with them. Why was he so angry now? He was crazy. Everything was messed up ever since that night. Damn it. Beauty Novel Songshu 566. Chapter 374. Saturday morning. Before dawn, Mikakito was woken up by knocking on the door. Hiroshi Kitato stood at the door with a huge backpack on his back. He grinned at him. "Brother, Wuyu and I are going camping in Hokkaido." Mikakito frowned. "When did you decide?" Ayuan clasped his hands together and looked apologetic. "Last night. I'm sorry, brother. Wuyu said it was a little secret between us and she didn't want me to tell anyone else. That's why I can only tell you now." Mikakito's face darkened. "Where is she now?" "She's already downstairs." "Brother, do you want to come with us?" Beitang furrowed his brows and looked at him with an unfathomable gaze before saying, "Go downstairs and have breakfast first." "Okay." Ayuan scratched his head and walked downstairs slowly like a little snail with a thick shell. 10 minutes later, Suzaku and Ayuan finished their breakfast. They carried their luggage and were about to go out. Mikakito was wearing casual clothes and carrying a huge suitcase as he walked downstairs. Suzaku instinctively looked at Ayuan. Ayuan covered her mouth with her right hand and blinked her beautiful eyes innocently. Mikakito looked at them indifferently and said slowly, "Everything is ready. Let's go." Suzaku said indifferently, "I only booked 2 tickets." In other words, she didn't reserve a seat for him at all. Mikakito said casually, "Cancel the tickets and take my private jet." Suzaku's expression didn't change. "Yes, boss." The calm expression on Beitang-shin's face cracked open. Ayuan took a sandwich from the dining table and put it in a food bag. She said with a smile, "Brother, I'll leave this for you to make breakfast on the way." Mikakito smiled. "No need. I'm not hungry." Mikakito's private jet was parked at Narita Airport. The cabin was luxuriously decorated and comfortable. Not long after the plane took off, Ayuan shouted that she wanted to catch up on sleep. She threw herself onto the soft and comfortable bed in the lounge and refused to get up. Suzaku and Mikakito sat in the living room, each choosing their favorite sofa. One of them read newspapers and magazines to pass the time, while the other used the flight time to have a video conference with Jianghu and the others. A few hours later, the 3 of them arrived at Hokkaido. Hokkaido's summer was different from Tokyo's high temperature and dry heat. The climate was pleasant, and the cool breeze was gentle. It was very suitable for camping. The 3 of them rented 3 mountain bikes and rode them to visit the lakes and mountains of Hokkaido. The morning air was fresh with dew and the fragrance of wildflowers. A thin mist shrouded the forest like gauze. The green lake meandered quietly in the wilderness. Large patches of golden sunflowers bloomed all over the hillside. There were also many unknown wildflowers blooming on both sides of the road. Suzaku relaxed completely in this paradise. She welcomed the wind, bathed in the sunlight, and leisurely rode the bike. Her lips curved into a smile that came from the bottom of her heart. Ayuan rode the fastest. She walked in front alone. She turned around and shouted to them, "Brother Wuyu, the scenery in front is so beautiful. Hurry up and come over." Vermilion Bird smiled and said, "I'll be right there." She sped up and rode her bicycle past Beitang-shin. Beitang-shin inadvertently turned his head and saw her at this moment. Her entire body was bathed in the sunlight with a tranquil smile on her face. Her hair was tied up in a high ponytail, and her fair skin was flushed red from exercise. She was extremely youthful and beautiful. He seemed to see the shadow of another person on her body, and his gaze couldn't help but become deep and serene. They camped on the hillside by the lake. 3 tents were set up side by side on the lawn. Suzaku used the ingredients she brought and prepared a simple but delicious dinner. A bonfire was lit on the lawn, and the sky was dotted with stars. Ayuan and Suzaku sat in front of the fire and chatted. Mikakito was on the phone in the distance, instructing Jianghu on something. When he came back from the phone call, he saw Ayuan whispering something in Suzaku's ear. Both of them had bright smiles on their faces. It was so dazzling that he found it dazzling. He wanted to stop, but he turned around and walked towards his tent. Outside the tent, Suzaku and Ayuan's happy laughter could be heard from time to time. Mikakito pinched his eyebrows. He turned on the music and put on his headphones. Late at night, the 3 of them fell asleep one after another. Mikakito was awakened by a shrill scream. He opened his eyes abruptly. It was Ayuan's voice. He quickly climbed out of his sleeping bag and ran towards Ayuan's tent. "Ayuan?" Suzaku also ran over. Her long hair was loose and she was wearing shorts and short-sleeved pajamas. She looked anxious. Mikakito opened his tent and turned on the light. He saw Ayuan in his sleeping bag sweating profusely. His face was abnormally red and his brows were furrowed. He was muttering something. "Ayuan, wake up." Mikakito called his name in a low voice. Ayuan suddenly trembled and slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were full of pain. He stared blankly at Mikakito and Suzaku. His voice was hoarse. Xiaoqing came to find me. She said it was all my fault. I killed her. She said the cemetery was cold and dark. She didn't want to stay there. Onie-san, did I do something wrong? I should have been with her all the time. Ayun, listen to me. Mikakito held his shoulders and stared into his eyes. She said solemnly, you just had a nightmare. You didn't do anything wrong. Xiaoqing is a very kind girl. She won't blame you. She wants you to live a happy life and not live with guilt for the rest of your life. For Xiaoqing, the best thing is to be buried in peace. She should go where she belongs. Tears welled up in Ayuan's eyes. His lips trembled a few times and he threw himself into Mikakito's arms and burst into tears. After a while, he wiped his tears and turned to Suzaku. I'm scared. I want to sleep with you. Okay. Suzaku answered without hesitation. Mikakito's expression was gloomy. She said in a low voice, no. If you're scared, move into my tent. Ayun widened his eyes. I don't want to. I slept with Wuyu last time. That's different. Mikakito's face was gloomy. Ayun was delirious last time, but now he was a normal man. I don't care. I want to sleep with Wuyu. Wuyu agreed. Ayuan's stubborn temper rose. He was so stubborn that it gave people a headache. Mikakito's eyes tightened and said in a deep voice, Ayun, you're no longer a child. Don't be willful. Ayun was startled and said with tears in her eyes, Brother, you actually yelled at me. Suzaku bit her lips and finally couldn't hold it in. She stared at Mikakito and said coldly, all right, stop blaming Ayun. Even if we live in the same tent, we'll sleep in our own sleeping bags. You seem to be worrying too much. Her tone carried a trace of ridicule. Did he really think that if she liked Ayuan, she would lead Ayuan astray? Mikakito's heart ignited with an unknown flame. Did she know the difference between men and women? Even if she acted like a man all day, she couldn't really live in the same room with a man, sleep in the same bed, and flirt with a man right under his nose, right? Mikakito was furious. He wanted to throw this shameless woman into the lake to feed the fish. Brother, don't show such a scary expression. I'm scared. Ayuan's eyes flickered and she hid behind Suzaku. Mikakito's face was ashen, and his sharp eyes glared fiercely at Suzaku. Do whatever you want. He left the two of them and crawled out of the tent, so that he wouldn't be angered to death by the two of them. Ayuan and Suzaku looked at each other and fell silent. A few seconds later, Suzaku smiled. Wait a moment, I'll go get my sleeping bag. Okay. A few minutes later, the two of them were lying side by side. Their sleeping bags were next to each other, and their heads were leaning against each other. Ayuan turned her head and looked at Suzaku, saying softly, Wuyu, my brother was jealous just now. Suzaku pursed her lips. Don't talk nonsense. He can't wait to kill me. Ayuan puffed her cheeks. If he's not jealous, then tell me, why is he so angry? Suzaku sighed. It's simple. He thinks that I like you, and he thinks that I'll lead you astray and steal you away from him. Ayuan frowned. Didn't you tell him that we're just good friends? I told him, but he didn't believe me. Suzaku closed her eyes and didn't want to talk about it anymore. Let's go to sleep. We have to wake up early tomorrow. Ayuan's brows were almost knitted into question marks. He felt that Suzaku's words made sense. However, Uncle Hanzo clearly said that his brother had feelings for Suzaku. He had already done so many things, shouldn't his brother be jealous? The matters of the heart are so complicated. The occasional unhappiness didn't affect Suzaku much. The next morning she still respectfully called Mikakito boss, and greeted her with a good morning. Mikakito looked as if he was frozen, and his whole body was emitting a cold aura. Suzaku didn't mind his cold face. She washed up, prepared breakfast, packed her luggage, and prepared for the next stop of the journey. Her and Ayuan's trip was originally scheduled to take a week, but Mikakito suddenly joined them, so they decided to shorten the trip to 5 days. On the 4th day they stayed in a valley and ate food that they bought when they passed by a village. There were also 3 cans of beer. Everyone had a bottle. They sat by the campfire, ate grilled fish, drank beer, and listened to the sound of the stream in the valley. They were far away from the hustle and bustle of the city, far away from the bloodshed and killing. Everyone's body and mind were completely relaxed. Suzaku looked at the moon in the sky, her voice a little lonely. We're going back tomorrow. I suddenly feel a little reluctant. Ayun smiled brightly. It's okay. We can go out and play together often in the future. Suzaku smiled slightly, her eyes filled with warmth. Mikakito drank silently, his face expressionless. No one knew what he was thinking. The next morning something unexpected happened. Ayun went missing. To be exact, Ayuan left Mikakito and Suzaku alone on his bike. Moreover, he used a knife to cut the tires of their mountain bike, took their communication equipment, and left them in this remote valley. Come and see. Shinmu 799. Chapter 375. Onie-san Wuyu, I'm very sorry for what I did, but I don't regret it at all. I know there are some misunderstandings between the two of you. Since there's no third party around, please resolve the misunderstanding. I'll be waiting for you at the airport in Hokkaido. You must come back safely. Ayuan. Mikakito's mouth twitched. He crumpled the note Ayuan left for them into a ball and threw it into the trash bag. It seems like we can only walk out of here. Suzaku was checking the tires of the mountain bike to make sure that there was no way to repair them under the current conditions. Mikakito glanced at Suzaku, who was squatting in front of the mountain bike, and opened the map. It's 24 kilometers from here to the road outside the mountain. We can catch a bus on the road back to the county. Suzaku suddenly looked up and stared at him. Boss, did you bring money? Mikakito's face darkened, and his eyes were filled with displeasure. Don't call me that again. Call me Mikakito like before. She stood up and shrugged. That's not the point. The point is that I realized that Ayuan took my wallet. Mikakito's eyes flickered. He rummaged through the suitcase and sure enough the wallet was gone. He was annoyed and amused at the same time. Little brat, you've planned this well. We're penniless now. Even if we walk out of this valley we can't take a bus or buy food. After Vermilion Bird understood how serious the situation was, she didn't get angry, nor did she get irritated. Instead, she calmly packed her luggage. Mikakito glanced at her and said indifferently, there's always a way out. Let's get out of here first. There's always a way to solve the other problems. Simplify your luggage and throw away all the unnecessary things. The two of them threw their tents, sleeping bags and other things into a cave so that they wouldn't pollute the environment. Anyway, they would be able to return to the county by the end of the day, and they wouldn't need these things anymore. After the reorganization, their luggage was very light when they returned. The two of them carried their luggage and set off on their journey. Birds chirped and flowers bloomed in the forest. They walked on the small path but no one said a word. After walking for more than an hour, Mikakito, who was walking in front, saw a mountain spring. She stopped and turned to look at Suzaku. After exercising, her face was flushed, like a beautiful apple. He said indifferently, "Are you thirsty? There's a spring up ahead." The spring water in the mountains was clean and clear, with a hint of sweetness. These days they had been drinking mountain spring water. Suzaku put down her backpack and took out a stainless steel cup. Boss, wait a minute. I'll go get some water. Mikakito's eyes darkened. I told you not to call me boss anymore. She looked at him steadily and smiled faintly. But you're my boss. You said that from the moment we signed the agreement, I'm your subordinate. Being attacked by her using his own words, Beitangshin felt a little irritated in his heart, but very quickly his mood calmed down. He reached out and took the cup from her hand and said indifferently, "Do you feel better now?" This woman was quite good at holding grudges. Suzaku was slightly stunned. She watched as he turned around and walked to the spring with the cup. He filled the cup with spring water, walked back to her and handed the cup back to her. He was tall and slender. Although he was carrying a backpack and wearing casual clothes, it didn't diminish his handsome and domineering aura. His arm was raised very straight, and his slender fingers gripped the cup tightly. His expression was calm, as if this was how it should be. What are you waiting for? Take it. She didn't take the cup, so Mikakito stuffed the cup into her hand. She held the cup but didn't drink it. She pursed her dry lips and handed the cup back to him. You drink first. He raised his eyebrows and smiled faintly. You're not calling me boss anymore? She bit her lip and glared at him in annoyance. You drink first. He didn't take the cup and said seriously, You drink first. I won't despise you. Vermilion Bird choked on his words, and her face turned slightly red. She tilted her head and drank half the cup in one breath. Then she poured the water out of the cup and said, Wait for me. She took the cup and ran back to the mountain spring. She refilled the spring water and handed it to him. He looked at her deeply, took the water and gulped it all down. They rested for a while before continuing on their journey. Before they left, they took another cup of water in case they needed it. Soon it was noon. They weren't very tired since they were both physically strong, but they were hungry. They were about 2 kilometers away from the highway. The hillside was filled with fruit trees. The apples and pears were already ripe, and the tempting fruits were hanging on the treetops, giving off a fragrant smell. Suzaku and Mikakito looked at the fruit garden at the same time. The two of them looked at each other, exchanging a message with their eyes. There was no one in the fruit garden. Suzaku coughed. Do you want to go or should I go? Mikakito said slowly, of course you want to go. It'll be embarrassing if I get caught. Suzaku's mouth twitched. It'll be embarrassing if I get caught too. He looked at her seriously. I'm a man. I have to care about my reputation. He just didn't want to go. Why did he have to come up with so many excuses? Suzaku complained in her heart. She put down her backpack and placed it beside his feet. Help me look after my things. She was wearing a checkered shirt and jeans. For convenience, she had tied the hem of her shirt up, making her waist look especially defined. She rolled up her sleeves and was about to jump over the fence when Mikakito suddenly grabbed her wrist and pursed his lips. Let me go. Suzaku was a little surprised. She couldn't understand why he suddenly changed his mind. He jumped into the apple orchard suavely and picked the big red apples. Suddenly they heard a dog barking. A black wolfhound pounced towards Mikakito. Behind the wolfhound was an old farmer carrying farming tools. Suzaku heard the dog barking and her heart was in her throat. She stood on her tiptoes and watched for a few seconds. Suddenly she saw Mikakito walking over with an old farmer. He was carrying a few apples and a huge wolfhound was following behind him. Suzaku knew that he had been caught by the owner of the fruit garden. She supported her forehead with one hand and tried to think of a solution. She lowered her eyes and saw the watch on her wrist. She quickly took it off. Mikakito looked humble as he bowed to the old farmer. I'm sorry. Please forgive my actions. I'll compensate you. The old farmer looked unhappy. You young people don't understand the hard work of fruit farmers at all? Mikakito bowed again. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Suzaku grabbed his arm and pulled him up. She smiled at the old man and said, Uncle, I'm sorry. It's all my fault. I like to eat sour food recently. When I see apples I'm sorry. I asked him to do that. We don't have any cash on us. Can I give you this watch as compensation? She held the watch with both hands and presented it to the old man. The old man's expression softened slightly. He sighed and said, It's not that I don't want to part with those fruits. It's just that there have been too many thieves recently. It's just a few apples. Take it. There's no need for compensation. Suzaku quickly bowed and thanked him with a smile. The old man seemed to have thought of something. He looked at her from head to toe and said, Miss, you like to eat sour food recently? Suzaku nodded. Yes. I don't know why. I used to hate sour food the most. The old man smiled. When my wife was pregnant with my son, she liked to eat sour food too. I guess you're going to be parents soon. Mikakito's eyes narrowed and his fingers clenched into fists. Suzaku widened her eyes in surprise and stammered, No, no way. The old man laughed heartily. You youngsters are really careless. Suzaku seemed to be shocked for a moment. She smiled awkwardly. No wonder my appetite seems to have increased recently. The old man looked serious. You can't let the child starve. Have you eaten? If you don't mind, you can come to my house for lunch. Suzaku said gratefully, Uncle, thank you so much. Hubby, we have food to eat. Mikakito froze. Although he knew that she was putting on an act, he still felt special when she called him hubby. The old man's wife had already prepared lunch. Since there were 2 guests in the house, she hurriedly cooked 2 dishes. She was so enthusiastic that Suzaku felt guilty. She felt that she had deceived a kind person. When they bid farewell to the old couple, Suzaku left her watch on the dining table when they weren't paying attention. The old man personally walked them to the path leading to the highway and reminded them to be careful on the way. As far as the eye could see, there were only the 2 of them on the field. Beitang-shin suddenly stopped, turned his head and stared straight into the vermilion bird's eyes, and said in a deep voice, What you said just now, is it true? Suzaku paused. What is it? Mikakito's tone became heavier. About the pregnancy. She said calmly, Of course it's not true. I just want to cheat a meal for us. His eyes were filled with suspicion. Are you sure? She frowned. Of course I'm sure. I've taken the morning after pill. I promise I won't cause you any trouble. His thin lips pursed and his face was expressionless. You better be. He wasn't ready to be a father yet. Moreover, if the child was conceived under such circumstances, no one could say for sure if there would be any defects under the influence of the drug. Unfortunately, before he could finish his sentence, Suzaku misunderstood him again. She thought that he didn't want her to get pregnant at all. Her eyes darkened and she said calmly, Let's not talk about such things that will never happen. She walked past him and quickened her pace. Her seemingly thin shoulders were carrying a big bag, and her back was straight and magnanimous. She exuded an air of arrogance that refused to admit defeat. There were very few cars on the highway. It took almost 10 minutes for a private car to arrive. Mikakito raised his hand to signal to the driver, but the driver ignored him and sped past him. His face was as dark as the bottom of a pot that had been burning for decades. At Xingu 799. Chapter 376. The next time a car passes by, I'll stop it for you. Suzaku placed her backpack by her feet. She took off her shirt and tied it around her waist. She was wearing a black tank top underneath. Her hair was tied up high, revealing her beautiful neck and slender arms. The afternoon sun shone on her body, giving her a bright glow. She was like a hibiscus, slender and elegant, pure and proud. Even in the midst of a noisy crowd, she was able to remain calm and indifferent, making her memorable. A car drove over from afar. Suzaku pulled the collar of her tank top lower, revealing her cleavage. She ran to the road and raised her right hand with a gentle smile on her lips. "Sir, please stop the car." Screech. The car's tires screeched against the asphalt road. A middle-aged man rolled down the car window and stared greedily at Suzaku's chest. Suzaku smiled faintly. "Sir, please give me a ride." The man revealed a perverted smile. "No problem. Get in. Wait for me." Suzaku ran to the side of the road and picked up her backpack. She grabbed Mikakito's arm and dragged him. "Let's go." When the driver saw Suzaku and Mikakito walking over, his wishful thinking fell through. He immediately changed his expression and stepped on the accelerator without waiting for them to open the door. The exhaust from the car sprayed their faces. F***ck. Suzaku was so angry that she almost vomited blood. She threw her bag on the ground and gave the driver the middle finger in the direction of the car. On the other hand, Beitang Shin had a calm expression on his face. His shoulders couldn't help but slightly tremble, and a deep smile appeared in his eyes. Suzaku glared at him and said fiercely, "Don't hold it in. Laugh if you want to." "I'm so angry." Mikakito did not disappoint her at all. He laughed loudly, and his joyful laughter echoed on the empty road. He looked very good when he laughed. His sexy lips were slightly curved and his eyes were full of smiles. His cold and handsome face softened and he looked more elegant. His laughter was deep and mellow, like wine that had been in the cellar for many years, exuding a charming fragrance. Listening to his laughter, Vermilion Bird's irritable heart actually slowly calmed down. She fixed her gaze on him, her beautiful eyes slightly narrowed. She discovered that this man's influence on her was getting bigger and bigger. This was not good at all. She shook her head hard and turned around abruptly. With her back facing him, she forced herself to get away from those wild thoughts. Beitang Shin retracted his smile and looked at her graceful back. There was still warmth in his eyes that had not dissipated. Vermilion Bird felt a weight on her head, and a man's sun hat fell on her head, blocking the dazzling sunlight. Shifting her line of sight, she saw that Beitang Shin was already standing beside her. His thin lips were slightly pursed, and his eyes were calmly looking straight ahead. His perfect side profile appeared even more charming under the sunlight. "Thank you." Her voice was very soft. "You're welcome." His voice was cold. In the end, they still couldn't flag down a car. Perhaps it was because they were in the wilderness and people were very cautious. They wouldn't take the risk of picking up two strangers. Fortunately, there was always a way out. A white van drove over. Mikakito stood in the middle of the road with his arms open. He stared coldly at the driver in the van, and he exuded an imposing aura. He didn't look like a hitchhiker but more like a robbery. The driver stepped on the brakes in a panic. The middle-aged woman sitting in the passenger seat poked her head out of the window and shouted at Mikakito. "What are you doing? Do you want to die?" "I'm sorry, madam." Suzaku hurried forward and explained with a smile, "Madam, we want to go to the county but we haven't seen a car. I'm not feeling well so my husband got anxious. I'm sorry for scaring you." The middle-aged woman looked back and forth between Suzaku and Mikakito suspiciously. She seemed to be considering whether they were telling the truth. Suzaku hurriedly tugged at Mikakito's arm and said softly, "Honey, apologize to madam." Mikakito's expression softened, and his tone was gentle. "I'm sorry. My wife is pregnant so I'm worried about her and the baby." The middle-aged woman didn't say anything, but the driver next to her interrupted. "Honey, if that's the case, let them get in the van." The woman thought for a moment and said, "Okay, but we don't have any seats in the front of the van. If you don't mind, you can go to the back of the van." I don't mind. Thank you, brother and sister-in-law." Suzaku smiled and thanked them. She gently tugged at Mikakito's arm. Mikakito smiled. "Thank you." The driver jumped out of the van and opened the door of the back of the van. An unpleasant smell assailed their nostrils. The driver smiled good-naturedly. There are dozens of chickens in here. The smell is a little strong. The woman also got out of the van with a few magazines in her hand. She handed them to Suzaku. Use this as a cushion in the van. You can sit for a while. Pregnant women can't stand for too long. Okay, thank you. Suzaku smiled and took the magazines. She calmly climbed into the van as if she didn't smell anything. It was very dark in the van, and the cooing of chickens could be heard in the darkness. She fumbled for a few steps and stopped near the wall of the van. She took out a small flashlight from her suitcase and turned it on to illuminate the van for Mikakito. Mikakito stood on the ground, frowning slightly. He seemed to be unable to bear the pungent smell inside. Suzaku smiled and said softly, "Honey, come on up. It's very spacious inside." Mikakito swore that if it wasn't for this woman, he would never have forced himself to climb into that smelly van. 10 minutes later, the van started moving. The two of them were already sitting on the magazine cushion. They pinched their noses and endured the unpleasant smell. Mikakito was still thinking about this serious problem. Why did he listen to Suzaku and climb into the van? Was it because they couldn't stop other cars? Obviously not. At most, they could forcefully stop other cars and force the driver to take them. Then what? He frowned and was still thinking. Suddenly, he felt a weight on his shoulder. Suzaku's head was resting on his shoulder. Her soft body was pressed against his, and he could hear her steady breathing. He shrugged his shoulders. Her chin moved, but she didn't pull back. Mikakito's mouth twitched. She actually fell asleep in such a harsh environment. After an unknown amount of time, the vermilion bird slowly opened her eyes. It was pitch black and an arm was wrapped around her waist. A broad palm was tightly pressed against her waist to maintain her balance, and her head was leaning on someone's broad shoulder. She was suddenly startled and quickly retracted her head and straightened her body. "Sorry, I fell asleep." Mikakito slowly withdrew his hand from her waist and said indifferently, "You can really sleep. You can even fall asleep in such a place." She coughed, and there was a hint of embarrassment in her tone. "I can even fall asleep in worse conditions. I'm sorry." In the darkness, Beitang-shin couldn't see the other party's appearance and expression clearly. He had to rely on words to analyze the other party's emotions so he could hear her embarrassment at this time. He couldn't help but imagine what kind of situation it would be if her ice-cold face revealed an awkward expression. He smiled. "You don't seem to have mentioned the past." She said indifferently, "There's nothing to talk about. I just went through training and was groomed to be an assassin. It's very simple." She said it lightly, but Mikakito knew what it meant. She had to train day and night, sweat mixed with blood, physical and mental torture. The ruthless assassin training was like purgatory on earth. He was silent for a moment and said slowly, "Have you ever thought about not being an assassin anymore?" She sneered. "What else can I do other than being an assassin? From the moment I killed the first person, there was no turning back. I can set you free." When he said those words, even Beitang-shin himself was shocked. Suzaku was stunned. What? He should be cold and ruthless. He should be scheming and shrewd. He wouldn't do anything that would harm his interests. She was still useful to him. He shouldn't give up on her so easily. Mikakito frowned and said angrily, "There's no reason. Are you not willing to set you free?" She was silent for a moment and laughed softly. "Thank you. But you can't threaten me with Director Lin anymore." He frowned even more. "You're both free." "Thank you." Her tone was relaxed and happy, which made him a little frustrated. She suddenly said, "Words are no guarantee. We'll sign the agreement when we get home." "I'm going back on my word. You've already lost your freedom." Mikakito's voice was cold and didn't sound like he was joking. Suzaku laughed self-deprecatingly. "Forget it. I don't have any expectations anyway." She knew that he wouldn't be so kind all of a sudden. The van stopped. Soon, the door of the van opened and faint light shone in. The driver's voice was heard. "We've arrived at the county. Get out." The two of them stood by the roadside and watched the van drive away. Mikakito patted his clothes in disgust as if there were many invisible germs on them. Suzaku looked at the sun in the sky and said, "What are we going to do now?" "Let's find a hotel first and inform Lu Xing to pick us up." Mikakito was a clean freak and couldn't stand the stench of chicken dung on his body. "We don't have any money left." Suzaku felt that it was necessary to remind him. He glanced at her indifferently. "I have a watch too." And his watch was worth a lot of money. The two of them found a clean and tidy hotel and pawned their watches to the hotel owner. Then they called Lu Xing, who was staying in Hokkaido, to pick them up. 2 hours later, Lu Xing arrived in a high-class car. Beitang Xin and Vermilion Bird had already changed their clothes and were enjoying the delicious dinner personally prepared by the proprietress of the hotel. It was getting late and Mikakito decided to stay for the night. The next morning, Suzaku felt that something was wrong with his body. Come and see. Hongcha 866. Chapter 377. When she brushed her teeth, she felt nauseous. Perhaps she had drunk too much and her stomach was upset. That was her guess. However, at the same time, she was calculating in her heart that this month's period would be in the next 2 days. If her period came, then everything would be fine. If it didn't come, she would need to buy a pregnancy test paper. Vermilion Bird sat in the back seat of the car, her whole body leaning against the soft back of the seat, her slender fingers rubbing her temples. She didn't look too good. Her face was pale and bloodless. Mikakito was sitting beside her. He turned to look at her and said calmly, "Are you not feeling well?" She closed her eyes and replied, "Yeah. My head hurts a little." She suddenly felt a hand on her forehead. It was cool and comfortable. He said unhurriedly, "Your body temperature is normal. Perhaps you didn't sleep well last night. There's still a long way to go. Take a nap first." He retracted his hand and the cool touch disappeared. She actually felt a little disappointed and despised herself for acting like this. She turned her body and curled up in a corner. An arm wrapped around her waist and pulled her to his side. He pressed her head forcefully against his shoulder and said firmly, "Lean against me." With his other hand he took a blanket and covered her body. She felt a sour and bitter taste in her heart. Her long eyelashes fluttered a few times as if she wanted to open her eyes. In the end she closed them tightly. She wanted to ask why he was so good to her. She also wanted to say that if he couldn't give her love, then he shouldn't be so good to her and let her fantasize about him. Mikakito hugged her and looked down at her sleeping face. His gaze was deep. When Lu Xing saw this scene through the rearview mirror, a smile appeared in her eyes. In her heart she was full of admiration for Beitang Yuan. It seemed that this move of the second young master really had a positive effect. The relationship between the eldest young master and the Vermilion Bird had advanced by leaps and bounds. Perhaps it was because his broad shoulders made her feel at ease. Perhaps it was because she was too tired, but Suzaku fell asleep very quickly. When she woke up, she realized that she was already leaning on his chest. Beside her ears, she could hear his heart beating powerfully. At the tip of her nose, she could smell the unique fragrance of his body. When she moved slightly, Mikakito opened her eyes. She tightened her grip on her waist and whispered, "You're awake? Does your head still hurt?" Suzaku got up from his arms and smoothed her messy hair. "I'm much better now. Thank you." The Hokkaido trio finally met up at the Sapporo airport. Hiroshi Kitado was wearing a white t-shirt, jeans and a sun hat. His handsome face was full of smiles, and he looked like an adorable puppy, wagging the non-existent tail behind him vigorously. "Brother Wuyu, you're finally back safely." Mikakito snorted with a straight face. "Thanks to you, we're not lost in the valley yet. Brother, don't be so petty. I'm doing this for your own good." Ayuan happily followed behind them. She tugged at Suzaku's arm and asked with a smile, "Wuyu, you won't blame me, right?" Suzaku stopped in her tracks. She raised her hand and knocked on his forehead. She said snappily, "I was almost angered to death by you. But seeing that you were kind, I'll forgive you." Ayuan acted cute with tears in her eyes. "You're really magnanimous. I'm so grateful." Mikakito shook her head in amusement. After the Hokkaido trip, they returned to Tokyo. Ayuan keenly noticed that the relationship between her brother and Suzaku had improved a lot. Although they still didn't interact much on the surface, they were no longer at daggers drawn and cold. It seemed that what he did was very effective. Ayuan had the motivation to continue. Oh yeah. Suzaku realized that things seemed to have gotten out of hand. Her period was already more than half a month old, but there were still no signs of it coming. She hid it from everyone and went to the supermarket to buy a pregnancy test kit. After the test, she sat in a daze on the toilet for more than half an hour. Damn it, she was pregnant. She had clearly taken the morning after pill. She held her forehead with one hand. Her head hurt and her heart was in a mess. The servant knocked on her door and invited her downstairs for dinner. Suzaku took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. She threw the pregnancy test kit into the trash can, washed her hands, sorted out her emotions and slowly went downstairs. She had something on her mind, so her appetite wasn't good. Her chopsticks picked up the food intermittently, and she didn't even know what she had stuffed into her mouth. She bit down lightly and her mouth was filled with the taste of fish. She felt disgusted and her stomach churned uncontrollably. She threw down her chopsticks, covered her mouth, and hurriedly ran downstairs to the bathroom. What's wrong? Ayun hurriedly put down her chopsticks and stood up. Just as she was about to chase after her, she remembered something and stopped in her tracks. She turned to look at Mikakito. Brother, Wu doesn't seem to be feeling well. Do you want to go and see her? Beitang Shin's deep and serene gaze retracted from Vermilion Bird's back and leisurely landed on her bowl. It was a half-eaten piece of fried fish. Suzaku lay on the toilet and vomited until she was dizzy. Her eyes were filled with tears from vomiting. Mikakito crossed his arms and leaned against the bathroom door. He watched as her thin shoulders trembled from vomiting. After a moment of silence, he finally walked up to her and patted her back. After a while she stopped vomiting and gasped heavily for breath. He asked in a deep voice, "Are you feeling better?" She nodded. She didn't dare to raise her head and let him see her sorry state. "Go out first. I need to tidy up." He left and closed the bathroom door behind him. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was pale, her hair was messy, and her eyes were filled with panic. She didn't look like herself at all. She sighed, rinsed her mouth, and patted her face with cold water. She raised her wet head and looked at herself in the mirror. She decided to hide it from everyone and solve this problem. The corridor of the obstetrics and gynecology department of the hospital was filled with pregnant women. Some of them were like Suzaku. There were no visible signs of pregnancy on their abdomens, but they looked very nervous. They must have come to the hospital for a checkup to confirm if they were pregnant. Suzaku still had a glimmer of hope. She thought that there was a problem with the pregnancy test kit she bought and that the test results were wrong. However, after the doctor's examination, he gave her a death sentence. "Miss Lin, congratulations. You're 6 weeks pregnant." Suzaku's body stiffened. Her fingers clenched into fists and her nails dug into her palms. After a long time she said, "Doctor, I don't want this child." The doctor was slightly stunned and frowned. "Miss Lin, abortion is illegal in our country." Suzaku smiled. "I know, but this law is obviously not binding. The abortion rate in Japan is still very high. I don't have the ability to give the child a complete family. I can't give birth to her. Doctor, please help me." The doctor sighed. "Have you thought about it?" Vermilion Bird nodded. "Yes, I've already thought about it." On the other side, Mikakito was having a meeting with his subordinates. Jiang Dao quietly pushed the door open and walked to his side. He leaned in and whispered in his ear, "Boss, the maid in the villa called. She said that she has something important to report to you." Mikakito asked him to transfer the call to the meeting room. The maid's voice was agitated as she said intermittently, "Young master, I was cleaning Miss Suzaku's room just now and found a pregnancy test kit. She's pregnant." Mikakito's fingers suddenly tightened around the phone. A storm suddenly gathered in his eyes. The scene from last night flashed across his mind. Suzaku was sensitive to the fishy smell and vomited for a long time. At that time, he had only suspected it, so he had asked the maid to pay more attention to Suzaku. He did not expect that she was really pregnant. He hung up the phone with a bang. His face was terrifyingly gloomy. Everyone in the meeting room lowered their heads, not daring to look into his cold eyes. Mikakito clenched his fists and said in a deep voice, "Where is Suzaku? Ask her to come to my office." Jiang Dao lowered his head. "Suzaku asked for leave today. She seems to be feeling unwell and needs to go to the hospital." As soon as he finished speaking, Mikakito strode out and said in a deep voice, "The meeting is over. Jiang Dao, prepare the car." "Yes, sir." Mikakito was expressionless. He exuded a powerful aura as he strode out. Everywhere he passed, all the employees bowed and did not dare to breathe loudly. Jiang Dao followed closely behind and ordered the driver to drive the car to the entrance of the company. After getting into the car, Mikakito called Suzaku's phone. It was turned off. The nearest hospital to the company was the first hospital. Suzaku might have gone there. He ordered the driver to drive to the first hospital. His fingers gripped his phone tightly. His heart was filled with complicated emotions. She was pregnant. He could not help but recall the conversation they had about the child. She was such a proud and resolute person. She would definitely not go back on her words. She would definitely abort the child. Aborting the child was the result he wanted. But why did he not feel happy at all? There was only an indescribable sense of panic. He was not ready to be a father, but he was not cruel enough to kill his own child. Once he understood his feelings, Mikakito's eyes shone with determination. He said in a deep voice, "Hurry up." Vermilion Bird was lying on the operating bed, quietly looking at the ceiling. In his heart he silently said, "I'm sorry." These apologies were for the child who was too late to be born. She was not a responsible mother. The nurse slowly injected the anesthetic into her body. She started to lose consciousness. Her eyelids felt heavy and she wanted to sleep. She felt someone pulling her legs apart. A gentle female voice comforted her and told her not to be afraid. She wanted to say that she was not afraid. She just felt sorry. The moment she closed her eyes, the door of the operating room was slammed open with a loud bang. Suzaku's last consciousness stopped at Mika Kito's stern voice. "Stop." Ad Songshu 566. Chapter 378. 2 hours later, when Suzaku regained consciousness, she was already lying on her bed. A tall figure was standing by the large window. The faint sunlight shone on him through the curtains, making it seem like a dream. Suzaku rubbed her temples and got up from the bed. Mika Kito heard the noise and turned around. His gaze fell on her and it was so deep that it made her shudder. He slowly approached her, and his entire body exuded a domineering and cold aura that made her feel suffocated. Suzaku met his gaze calmly and said indifferently, "I took the morning after pill but I didn't expect it to be ineffective. I'm sorry to have caused you trouble." Her tone was calm and distant. She didn't treat him as the child's father at all. It was as if they were strangers living under the same roof. Mika Kito felt an inexplicable anger rise in his heart. He stared at her with a gloomy face. "Why did you hide it from me?" She ran her fingers through her hair and said calmly, "I thought I could solve it. If you hadn't appeared, this problem would have been solved." "Damn woman, why didn't you ask for my opinion? I'm the child's father." On the way to the hospital, Mika Kito had already accepted this fact. He even started to think about how to fulfill his responsibilities as a father. Suzaku's lips curled into a mocking smile. She stared at his face calmly. "Have you forgotten that you once expressed your wish not to have children? I thought your opinion was already very clear." His expression froze. "I've changed my mind now. Even a vicious tiger won't eat its cubs. I'm not so cruel as to kill my own child." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly reached out, grabbed her arm and dragged her down from the bed. He suppressed his anger in a low voice. "Come with me." "Where to?" She instinctively struggled. He pulled her into his arms and his arm wrapped tightly around her slender waist. He threatened in a low voice, "Try moving again." Suzaku bit her lips. Yes, she was not as good as him in terms of physical strength and martial arts, but that did not mean that she would surrender and let him do whatever he wanted to her. She lost her cool and her eyes were filled with anger. She vented the resentment in her heart at him. "Beitang Shin, what are you trying to do? I've had enough. Let go of me. I don't need you to meddle in my affairs." "Shut up." Mika Kito held her tightly in her arms, her eyes burning with anger. "Don't move. If you hurt the child, I won't let you off." "You lunatic, what are you trying to do? Let go, I told you to let go." Suzaku was forcefully dragged downstairs by his arm. She quickly grabbed the railing of the stairs. Her fair skin was dyed red with anger. She gritted her teeth and said, "If you don't make it clear, I won't go with you." She was like an angry kitten, her fur standing on end as she stared at him warily. The mask of indifference and heartlessness had cracked, leaving only anger. Mika Kito actually found this side of her very interesting. He restrained his cold and stern aura, and his tone was much gentler. "Let's go visit Director Lin now to discuss the marriage." "No, I've said before that I don't agree to the marriage." Suzaku was slightly stunned and immediately hugged the railing even tighter. Mika Kito suppressed the anger in his heart and tried to reason with her. "We already have a child. Even if you don't think for yourself, you should think for the child. Do you want the child to be called an illegitimate child the moment he's born?" She slowly said, "So, you're marrying me for the child?" He pursed his lips and slowly said, "Yes." She chuckled. "I understand." Her smile was as bright as a spring flower, but it made him feel uneasy. His lips moved a few times and he wanted to say something but he could not. In the end he gave up. Bending down, he caught her off guard and lifted her up by her waist. She smiled faintly. "Put me down. I promise I won't run away again." He lowered his head and looked at her. He did not put her down as she wanted. He was still wary of her. He carried her directly and put her in the front passenger seat of the car. After fastening the seatbelt, he sat in the driver's seat. The afternoon sun quietly poured down on the wooden floor of the front yard. A gentle breeze blew, and the wind chimes hanging under the eaves tinkled. Mika Kito and Suzaku knelt on the carpet, and a tea set was placed on the coffee table in front of them. Director Lin was wearing reading glasses, and there was a kind smile on his wrinkled face as he skillfully brewed tea. The aroma of the tea filled the air. Mikakito took a sniff and slowly took a sip. He gently placed the purple clay teacup on the coffee table. He smiled and said in a deep voice, "Director Lin, I'm here today to talk to you about my marriage with Wu Yu." Marriage? Director Lin placed the teapot back on the coffee table. Her gaze landed on Suzaku and she looked puzzled. "Wu Yu, you're going to marry Mr. Beitang. Is this true?" Suzaku's lips curved upwards and a faint smile bloomed on her face. "Yes, we've decided to get married." Director Lin couldn't believe her ears. Although she didn't ask anything, she knew that Wu Yu seemed to be working under Mikakito. She also knew that she and Wu Yu were controlled by Mikakito. She didn't expect them to develop to this stage. Director Lin was silent for a moment, and looked at Mikakito seriously. "Mr. Beitang, I've always treated Wu Yu as my biological daughter. I hope that she can be happy. May I ask why you want to marry Wu Yu?" Suzaku's gaze shifted and she looked at the man beside her. His face was calm and his lips were slightly pursed. She didn't want to put him in a difficult position. "Because I'm pregnant. I love her." Both of them spoke at the same time. Principal Lin was suddenly shaken as he stared at the two of them in disbelief. The vermilion bird also stared at Beitang Shin in disbelief. However, it only lasted for 2 seconds before she retracted her gaze as a hint of sadness flashed past her eyes. She should know that he was only lying in order to make Principal Lin feel at ease. Director Lin's fingers trembled, and she held the edge of the coffee table tightly. She said slowly, "Wu Yu, are you really pregnant?" "Yes." Suzaku's gaze was as calm as still water. Director Lin's lips trembled and she wanted to say something, but in the end she held herself back. Young people nowadays were no longer like old fogies like her. She sighed and turned to look at Mikakito. "Mr. Beitang, if you really like Wu Yu, then I wish you all the best. Please take good care of Wu Yu. She's a very innocent girl, please don't let her get hurt." Mikakito placed his hands on his knees and bowed humbly. "I won't let you down. I'll take good care of her." Okay. Director Lin's eyes were wet, and she looked at him with a gratified expression, nodding repeatedly. Suzaku was like a puppet, sitting quietly at the side with a tranquil smile, listening to Mikakito and Director Lin discuss the time and style of the wedding. Mikakito turned to look at her with a smile. "Do you like Chinese, Japanese, or Western?" She smiled. "I'll listen to you." He thought for a while and said, "How about Western?" He considered that she didn't understand Japanese culture, and it would be difficult to hold a Japanese wedding. A Chinese wedding would also be very cumbersome, so a Western wedding would be simpler. She smiled. "Okay." His gaze was extremely gentle. "Make a list of friends you want to invite, and we'll personally write an invitation letter to them." "Okay." "As for the wedding gown, I plan to ask the chief designer in France to help you design it. You can tell me any details you want, and the designer will try his best to fulfill them." "Okay." In this conversation she said the word, "okay," the most. Mikakito and Director Lin both sensed that there was something wrong with her. Before they left, Director Lin took her hand and said something intimate. "Will you tell me honestly? Were you forced?" Suzaku smiled brightly. "Director, you're thinking too much. I agreed to marry him willingly." "Then why do you seem a little strange? It's as if you don't care much about anything." Suzaku ran her fingers through her hair and lowered her eyes, looking a little shy. "As long as I marry him, I don't care about anything." "I see. Then I'm relieved." Director Lin was relieved. She patted the back of her hand and smiled from ear to ear. "I think Mr. Beitang treats you quite well. You two are a good match. I'm happy for you." Previously, Director Lin was still a little worried. But after discussing the wedding with Mikakito, she could tell that Mikakito had feelings for Wu Yu. She also believed that he would treat Wu Yu well. On the way home, Suzaku turned her back to Mikakito and looked out of the car window. "I haven't seen Director Lin so happy in a long time. Even if it's just an act, I still have to thank you." Mikakito glanced at her back. "Try to trust me more in the future. I'm not acting." Suzaku wanted to laugh but she couldn't. He had already told her frankly that he was marrying her for the sake of the child, but he still admitted that he loved her in front of Director Lin. If this wasn't an act, then what was? However, it didn't matter. When the news of their marriage spread to China, Xia Dong and the children were all shocked. Bailey Han, on the other hand, was overjoyed. He felt that his potential love rival had finally been defeated. To him this was a good thing. The family packed their luggage and arrived in Japan a week in advance. They planned to take the opportunity to travel to Japan. It was their family's first trip. On the day they arrived at the airport, Mikakito brought Suzaku to welcome them. Congratulations. Bailey-han smiled as he extended his hand and shook Mikakito's hand. Mikakito smiled. Thank you. Xiaodong hugged Suzaku and said with a smile, I really didn't expect you two to get together, but you two are really compatible. Suzaku, congratulations. Suzaku also hugged her and smiled. Thank you. Uncle Shin. The three children shouted happily as they pounced on Mikakito. Suzaku watched as he was surrounded by the children with a bright smile on his face. During this time he raised his head to look at Xiaodong and whispered something to her. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. She could clearly see that his eyes were still filled with love and adoration. Welfare Hongcha 866. Chapter 379. Vermilion Bird envied the tacit understanding between the two of them. She also envied the feelings between the two of them. However, even though she was envious, she was not jealous of Xiaodong, who had always been hidden in the depths of her heart. She would not hurt him because of this, because to her, Xiaodong was also a very important friend. Before Xiaodong and Bailey-han came to Japan, they had already planned their daily schedule. The time they spent with Mikakito and the rest was very short. They would leave early and return late every day, taking the children to play around. 2 days before the wedding, Tomek flew over from Italy and brought Holly's blessings. The blue sky was clear, the sun was rising, and the clear lake was sparkling. Next to the lake there was a boundless lawn. All kinds of heart-shaped balloons were flying in the air, and cheerful music brought out a strong sense of jubilation. This was a grand lawn wedding. The venue was meticulously decorated. Guests in all kinds of gowns walked hand in hand, chatting and laughing with their acquaintances. The wedding would start in half an hour. In the bride's lounge, Suzaku was wearing a white wedding gown. She sat in front of the dressing mirror with mixed feelings. She almost couldn't recognize herself in the mirror. So there would be a day when she would wear a wedding gown and marry the man she loved. But why did she feel more sad than happy? She clenched her fists tightly. Her heart was beating very fast. There was a voice in her heart that kept telling her that he didn't love her. He only married her for the sake of the children and for the sake of responsibility. She couldn't let the mistake continue. She should return him his freedom. 10 minutes later. The door to the lounge was tightly shut. Mikakito stood at the door. He was wearing a white wedding gown. The contours of his face were like a perfect work of art. His thin and sexy lips were slightly curved. His long and well-defined fingers were slightly bent as he knocked on the door. His voice was magnetic and had a subtle gentleness. Suzaku, it's almost time. Are you ready? There was silence. His eyes flashed and he increased his strength. Suzaku? There was still no answer. Break the door, he said to Jiangdao behind him. The door was slammed open. There was no one in the room. The wedding dress was abandoned on the floor, and the veil was thrown on the windowsill. Mikakito picked up the veil and held it tightly in her hand. The aura she exuded changed completely. Her natural domineering aura was tinged with fury. Her deep black eyes were like sharp blades, and she wanted to cut the woman into pieces. Jiangdao informed his subordinates stationed at the wedding venue to track down Suzaku, while Mikakito canceled the wedding in front of all the guests. The guests were in an uproar. They whispered to each other and made all kinds of guesses. Mikakito didn't care that he would become the laughingstock of the Japanese mafia. He didn't care about these people's probing or sympathetic gazes. The only thing he cared about was the woman who dared to run away from the marriage. He didn't understand why she had to run away. He had to catch her and ask her the reason. Brother Shin. Xiaodong walked to Mikakito's side, not knowing how to comfort him. He said calmly, I'm fine. He looked calm on the surface, but Xiaodong knew that he was extremely angry. If he caught Suzaku, she would be severely punished. Even she started to worry about Suzaku. But why did Suzaku run away from the marriage? Clearly the two of them looked very happy. Bei Tang deeply thought that with his own power, he could easily find the whereabouts of the vermilion bird. Later on he found out that he was wrong. The vermilion bird was really a ruthless woman. If she wanted, she could hide in a place where no one would be able to find her for the rest of their lives. It had been 3 years and Mikakito still didn't know where she was. He even started to wonder if this woman was still alive. Otherwise, why didn't she contact Director Lin or Ayuan for 3 years? Mikakito would bring Ayuan to visit Director Lin every week. They seemed to be deliberately avoiding Suzaku and always talked about trivial things. On the day of the Mid-Autumn Festival, Director Lin drank 2 glasses of rice wine and was slightly drunk. She held Mikakito's hand and murmured, Shin, can you wait for another year? Okay. Mikakito helped her to the bed to rest. She sighed. If Wuyu still doesn't want to come back after a year, don't wait for her anymore. Mikakito didn't answer. He waved his hand and called the maid to take care of Director Lin. Outside the courtyard, the moonlight was cold, and the air was filled with the fragrance of osmanthus flowers. He stood in the garden and looked at the full moon in the sky. His finger gently rubbed the ring on his left hand. The diamond on the ring shone charmingly under the moonlight. On such a night, he couldn't help but wonder if she had kept their child. If she had given birth to the child should be able to run, jump, and call her mommy by now. In a small town in Hokkaido, the residents here basically relied on fishing and fish farming for a living. Every day, many boats went out to sea against the rising sun and returned with a full load under the sunset. The people here were simple and honest. The residents on the island all knew each other, and they warmly helped the outsiders. For example, in the largest flower shop on the island, the young lady boss took care of the shop alone with her 2-year-old child. The elderly neighbors often helped her take care of the child when she was busy. The flower shop was located in the busiest part of the street and was very close to a middle school. After school, a few girls liked to buy flowers from the shop and bring them home. In fact, buying flowers wasn't their main purpose. Their main purpose was to tease the lady boss's Xiao Bao. Sister Wuyu were here again? Led by Xiaoxuan, the girls carried their school bags and walked into the flower shop with smiles on their faces. Behind the counter stood a young woman in an apron. Her hair was combed into a bun on top of her head, and her neat bangs covered her smooth forehead. A pair of black-framed glasses rested on the bridge of her nose. She smiled and greeted the girls. "Hello, what flowers would you like to buy today?" A bright smile appeared on Xiaoxuan's delicate face. "Lilies. I'm going to give them to mommy today." "Is that so? What a good girl." Wuyu smiled and praised Xiaoxuan. Her fingers skillfully wrapped the bouquet. "Sister Wuyu, where's Now? Why don't I see Now?" Chiba, who had already scanned the flower shop and didn't find the target person, came to the counter and asked eagerly. Wuyu smiled apologetically. Now is tired from playing with Chiyo-yi during the day. She's sleeping upstairs now. Chiba put her hands together and said pitifully, "Sister Wuyu, I don't feel well after not seeing Now for a day. Can you let me go upstairs and take a peek? I swear I won't wake her up." "I also want to see." Xiaoxuan and the other girls also came up. Wuyu laughed. "All right, I really don't know what to do with you." "Yeah, thank you, Sister Wuyu." The girls ran upstairs excitedly. After taking 2 steps, they all lightened their steps and reminded each other not to wake Now up. Wuyu looked at their backs and shook her head with a smile. On the second floor of the flower shop was Wuyu and Now's bedroom. Xiaoxuan gently opened the door of Now's bedroom. It was a beautiful and cozy children's room. Now was curled up in a small bed that was more than 1 meter long. He was sleeping soundly with his eyes closed. His little face was pink and chubby like a cute big apple, which made people want to take a bite. His eyelashes were long and curly. He was a boy, but he had thick and dense eyelashes, which made the older girls envious. Xiaoxuan couldn't help but reach out and touch his smooth and tender little face. Chiba took out her phone and took a picture of Now's sleeping face. The girls didn't want to wake Now up, so they didn't stay for long. Soon they went downstairs and paid the bill at the counter. They took the flowers and said goodbye to Wuyu with a smile and skipped home. As Chiba walked, she looked at the pictures of Now saved on her phone and sighed. Now is so good looking. I think his father must be very good looking too. Xiaoxuan knocked on her forehead. "Don't say such things in front of Sister Wuyu. I heard that Sister Wuyu's husband is dead. Don't remind her of sad things, okay? Aya, don't keep knocking on my forehead. I'm not a fool. Of course, I won't say such things in front of Sister Wuyu." I'm sorry. I'm used to it and can't change it." "Xiaoxuan, you're so annoying." The girls walked forward noisily, scattering their laughter all the way. October 21st was a very special day. 3 years ago, Mikakito and Suzaku held their wedding on that day. Suzaku ran away from the wedding. Mikakito thought for a long time and decided not to passively wait for her to appear. There were some things that he wanted to tell her. Mikakito, who never appeared on television, participated in a talk show with high ratings on October 21st. As soon as the show started, he faced the camera and said slowly, "Honey, it's been 3 years. You should have had enough fun. Come back quickly. I miss you very much." The beautiful host was very excited and quickly asked, "Mr. Beitang, you never talk about your personal feelings in front of the media. Why did you suddenly change your mind today?" Mikakito had a gentle smile on his face. "Today is a very special day. 3 years ago today my wife and I held our wedding. However, before the wedding, my wife abandoned me and ran away alone. The audience was in an uproar. The host did not expect such a shocking story and asked, "May I ask why your wife ran away from the wedding?" Mikakito rubbed the ring on his ring finger and smiled. "I've been asking myself this question for a long time. It wasn't until recently that I figured it out. My wife thought that I didn't love her and that I married her out of responsibility. That's why she ran away and wanted to give me back my freedom. She was right. At that time, I did marry her out of responsibility." Beauty novel xianxia 866. Chapter 380. The host asked curiously, "How do you feel about your wife now? Is there anything you want to say to her?" Mikakito looked at the camera affectionately, as though he could see Suzaku's eyes through the lens. He said slowly, "Honey, I've sorted out my feelings. Can I love you now?" He was the leader of the underworld, the CEO of the Boao group, and a legendary figure who never appeared in the media. No one had expected him to confess to his wife in front of the entire country. At this moment he was no longer domineering or aggressive. All that was left was his deep love for his wife, his desire for love, and his humility. Many people in the audience were moved by his words. The host also couldn't help but take the lead and applaud him. The applause was like a tidal wave, booming like thunder. After the audience quieted down, the host said, "Mr. Beitang, if your wife doesn't want to come back, will you continue to wait for her?" This question was the focus of everyone's attention. Mikakito had already waited for Suzaku for 3 years. Was he still willing to wait for her? Everyone's eyes were on him, waiting for his answer. Mikakito smiled and said calmly, "I won't wait for her anymore." The audience was in an uproar. Some people whispered to each other, obviously not satisfied with his answer. The host's expression changed and he smiled awkwardly. "Can you tell me the reason?" Mikakito ignored everyone's doubts. He looked deeply into the camera and said in a deep voice, "Honey, I don't care where you are in the world and I don't care if you can hear what I'm saying today. I want to reiterate that I won't wait for you anymore. I'm going to look for you. Even if you're at the end of the world, I'll find you. You'll be my legal wife for 10 years or 20 years, and you'll never run away." The audience was stunned for a moment. Soon, thunderous applause broke out. "It's so touching, Mr. Beitang. You will definitely find your wife." The host stood up and applauded him with red eyes. Mikakito also stood up. He faced the audience and the camera and said solemnly, "My wife is Wu Yulin. If anyone has any news about her, please contact my assistant at any time. I will reward the person who provides me with the information. I'm counting on everyone." With that, he placed his hands on the sides of his legs and bowed deeply to everyone. The host quickly said, "Regarding the contact information of Mr. Beitang's assistant and Mrs. Beitang's photo, please look at the bottom of the big screen. If you have any news about Mrs. Beitang, you can also contact the program team. I hope that with everyone's efforts this pair of lovers can finally get married. Thank you for your support." News about Mikakito was all over the country, and the video of his show was also widely circulated on the internet. Even the girls at school knew that he was looking for his wife who had left home for 3 years. Xuanhuan held her phone and watched the video. She sighed with tears in her eyes. "Oh my God. I didn't expect the handsome Uncle Beitang to already have a wife. What a pity. Oh no. I mean, it's so touching." Chiba patted her shoulder. "Xuanhuan, I think Uncle Beitang mentioned that his wife is Wu Yulin, right?" "Yes. There's a photo of her here." Xuanhuan pointed at the small photo at the bottom of the video. "She's very pretty but she looks cold." Chenye's delicate brows furrowed. "Little Sun, do you think the person Uncle Beitang is looking for is Sister Worryless? Sister Wuyu?" Xuanhuan widened her eyes and waved her hand. "That's impossible. Sister Wuyu has a bright smile on her face every day. She's completely different from the cold beauty in the photo." Chiba scratched her head. "But I think they look a little alike." Xuanhuan shook her head. "I still think it's impossible." After school, when the girls went to the flower shop to buy flowers, they were still whispering about this matter. From time to time, they would steal glances at Wu Yu, who was busy behind the counter. Xuanhuan lowered her voice. "Chiba, if you don't give up, you can ask Sister Wu Yu." "Why me?" Chiba glared at her. "Idiot. Because you're curious, aren't you?" Xuanhuan pulled her away from her friends and pushed her to the counter. She said loudly, "Sister Wu Yu, Chiba has something to ask you." Wu Yu turned around with a bouquet of flowers in her arms. She smiled and said, "What do you want to ask me?" Chiba was almost angered to death by Xuanhuan. She frowned in annoyance and hesitated, not knowing what to say. Wu Yu looked at her gently. Chiba, what's the matter? Chiba shook her head frantically. No, nothing. Sister Wuyu, do you know the CEO of Boa Corporation, Mikakito? Wuyu's smile did not change. I don't know him. What's the matter? Chiba heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time she felt a little disappointed. Xiaoxuan patted Chiba's shoulder. See, I told you that Sister Wuyu is the person Uncle Beitang is looking for. Wuyu asked quizzically, what are you talking about? Why can't I understand? It's like this. The CEO of Boa Corporation, Mikakito, participated in a talk show. He said on the show that he wanted to find his wife. Xiaoxuan put her hands together and told Wuyu what Mikakito said on the show with tears in her eyes. How was it, Sister Wuyu? Wasn't it very touching? The little girl blinked her beautiful eyes and looked at her eagerly. Wuyu smiled. Yes, it was very touching. When Chiba found out that Wuyu was not the person Mikakito was looking for, she was worried that she would be reminded of her sad past, so she quickly interrupted. Sister Wuyu, where's now? He went out to play with Akino. The little rascal is so clingy. Wuyu's smile was full of affection. Mommy, I'm back. A soft child's voice suddenly came from the door. Ah, now is back. Xiaoxuan and Chiba shouted happily as they rushed to the door. Soon they walked into the flower shop, each holding a little girl's hand. The chubby little boy had a bright smile on his face. He raised his little head and looked innocently at Worryless behind the counter with his big watery eyes. His voice was soft and coquettish as he said, Mommy, I'm not a brat. I'm a good baby. Now, it's useless to act like a spoiled child. You're just a disobedient little rascal. Wuyu took off her gloves and came out from behind the counter. She rubbed her son's face and asked, Where's Uncle Aquino? Uncle Aquino is outside. The little boy turned around and pointed outside the flower shop. Now, play with your sisters. Mommy will go out for a while. Wuyu patted her son's head and entrusted her son to Xiaoxuan and Chiba. On the street outside the flower shop, a young policeman was holding a bicycle and chatting with an old lady. This policeman was Akino Asakura. He was the town's patrol officer and was very kind and cheerful. He was very loved by the town's residents. The old lady was Wuyu's neighbor and often helped her take care of Now. She made delicious food and liked to give it to them. Wuyu and Now both liked this kind old lady. Wuyu smiled and greeted them. Auntie Kimura, Officer Aquino. When Aquino saw her, a bright smile appeared on his face. Hello, Miss Wuyu. Wuyu, you're here. Mrs. Kimura smiled. You guys have a chat. I still have some soup at home. I'll go back first. Aquino, don't forget what I told you. Aquino smiled and waved his hand. I definitely won't forget. I've already remembered it in my heart. Mrs. Kimura left, satisfied. Wuyu pointed at her flower shop. Do you want to go in and have a seat? Aquino adjusted the hat on his head. It's okay. I still have something to do. Mrs. Kimura asked me to help her find her cat. Wuyu pursed her lips and smiled. Thank you, Officer Aquino. Did Now give you any trouble today? No, the little guy was very obedient today. Aquino's young and handsome face smiled gently. How about you? Did you have a good day? Yes, business is good and I'm in a good mood. Anyway, thank you for taking care of Now for me. Wuyu smiled and patted his shoulder. When you're on vacation this weekend, I'll treat you to good food. He shrugged. Sure, but I prefer you to cook for me. She smiled and raised her eyebrows. Don't push your luck. He laughed heartily. In the evening, Wuyu closed the shop. She carried Now in one hand and carried the vegetables she had bought from the market in the other. She walked upstairs. Mommy, I want to eat braised fish today. Now hugged her neck and said in a baby voice. Wuyu kissed his tender little face and smiled. Okay, Mommy will help the little gluttonous cat cook fish. After dinner, she sat on the sofa with her son in her arms and taught him to speak Chinese. Although she lived in Japan, she had never forgotten that she was from China. Her son had to learn Chinese and Chinese characters. After tutoring her son for more than an hour, she bathed him, told him stories and coaxed him to sleep. When she was done, it was already past 9 o'clock in the evening. Wuyu glanced at his watch, took off the glasses on the bridge of his nose, and took the laptop on the table over. She turned on her computer and typed in Beitang Xin's name in the search box. News about him flooded out in an overwhelming manner. The latest and most popular news was that he had participated in a television program to find his wife's whereabouts in front of the entire nation. Every word he said struck deep into her heart, especially the part where he said, "My heart has been sorted out," which made her heart tremble. She clenched her fists and stared at his handsome face. For the past 3 years she thought that she could forget him, but Now's existence kept reminding her that her son had a father. She was still thinking about her son's father. Damn it. Her gaze slowly moved from his face to his left hand. He was wearing a diamond ring on his ring finger. She raised her left hand. There was a ring of the same design on her ring finger. Her nose felt like it was choking on chili. It was unbearably spicy and her eyes sparkled. Xianxia 866. Chapter 381. The sun shone warmly on the window. A woman in a white sweater and a long woolen dress stood among the flowers. She had a gentle smile on her lips and her eyes were slightly downcast as she quietly tended to the flowers in her hands. Outside the window, a tall man in a black suit had been standing there for a long time. His handsome face was expressionless as his deep eyes stared intently at the woman standing in the flower shop. It was her. It was really her. The woman who had made him yearn for her for thousands of days and nights. Ding dong, the wind chime at the door made a crisp and pleasant sound. A pair of slender legs stepped through the door. Wu smiled and looked up. Welcome. The next second, the smile on her face froze. At the door stood a tall and handsome man. Because of the light, his face was dark and gloomy, but his body exuded an aura of disdain. His pitch-black eyes stared intently at her as if he wanted to see through her organs and penetrate deep into her bones. She pursed her lips and quietly met his gaze. The two of them looked at each other like this, as if they wanted to engrave each other deeply in their minds. Mommy, a soft child's voice came from the stairs. Now was wearing Pikachu pajamas. He rubbed his sleepy eyes and shook his little butt as he slowly walked down the stairs. Wu's eyes flashed with panic. She quickly turned around intending to hide her son. However, Mikakito was faster than her. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her into his arms, hugging her tightly. His hot breath sprayed on her earlobes. She squirmed uneasily, lowered her voice and said hurriedly, "Let go of me. Now is coming down. If there's anything, let's talk outside." His arm was firmly pressed on her waist. His eyes were fixed on the little ball of meat that appeared on the stairs. His voice was low and dangerous. "No, I want to let my son know about our relationship now. I'm begging you. Let go." Her voice was anxious and flustered. The fake calmness on her face had been torn apart, and a pleading expression emerged. His cold heart actually softened the moment he heard her soft pleading. He slowly let go of her hand and she was like a panicked little rabbit, immediately jumping out of his arms. She quickly adjusted her facial expression and smiled at their son who was approaching them. Now you're awake? Mommy, who's that strange uncle?" Now swayed his little butt as he walked down the last step. He tilted his head curiously and looked at Mikakito behind her. Mommy's friend. Wu stroked the hair by her ear and pursed her lips. His handsome face was full of gentleness. He held now. And handsome now. Yes. Now nodded vigorously. He puffed up his pink cheeks and muttered, "Mommy likes to call me now. Actually, my name is now." Mikakito tried hard to control the urge to pull now into his arms. He smiled even more gently. Now. What a cute name. The little boy's eyes sparkled. He said unhappily, "You can't call me now. Only Mommy can call me now." Mikakito's eyes were full of smiles. He rubbed his soft hair dotingly. "If I were your daddy, would I call you now?" The little boy tilted his head. His beautiful big eyes were full of curiosity. "But I don't have a daddy." "Uncle, you're so strange. Don't have a daddy?" The little boy's innocent words were like a hammer that struck Mikakito's heart hard. He suddenly turned his head and glanced dangerously at Wu, who lowered her head and pretended to be innocent. Mikakito picked now up from the ground. He stared into his clear eyes and smiled gently. Now, I'll be your daddy, okay?" Now shook his head. "No, I like Akiko. I want Akiko to be my daddy." "Akiko? That damned woman. She actually hooked up with another man." Mikakito was furious. He wanted to drag her and his son home right now. "Uncle, you look terrible. It's so scary." The little boy tugged at his clothes and shrunk his neck. However, he didn't show any fear on his face. His bright eyes shone with a sly light. What a mischievous little boy. Mikakito's heart softened and his anger dissipated. He kissed him on the cheek. Now. Watch carefully. I'll definitely be your daddy." Now wiped his little face in disgust and pouted. "You can't kiss me. Only Mommy can kiss me. You can't make me now either." Mikakito was amused by this cute little boy. He laughed heartily. This was the first time in 3 years that he laughed so happily. Now was very active. He ran wildly upstairs and downstairs. He was like an active pony that couldn't stop for a moment. One moment he ran to his grandmother's house next door to play with the little cat. The next moment he led his car to a fish stall and squatted in front of it. He muttered, "Braised fish, braised fish." It wasn't until Mikakito bought him a big fish that he held in his hand that he followed him home with Gigai. Mikakito understood why Suzaku named their son Now. He must have been very noisy when he was just born. She had to take care of her son alone and take care of the flower shop. When Mikakito thought about how hard it was for Suzaku, he couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Soon it was nighttime. Mikakito sat on the sofa with his son in his arms. His thoughts were all on Suzaku. She was wearing an apron and preparing dinner in the kitchen. She stood gracefully in front of the kitchen counter. Her movements were skillful and her expression was gentle. 3 years had not left many traces on her. On the contrary, she had become more charming. After being sculpted by time, her entire body radiated an irresistible charm. Now, wash your hands and eat. There's your favorite braised fish." Suzaku's cheerful voice came from the kitchen. Mikakito smiled and rubbed his son's hair. Now, wash your hands and eat. Don't call me Now. Now glared at him unhappily. He slid down the sofa from his arms and ran to the bathroom to wash his hands. Mikakito was worried about him and followed him. When he entered the bathroom, he saw the little boy standing on a small stool. He put his little hands under the faucet and carefully washed his little hands. His serious look was extremely adorable, causing a strong sense of pride to rise in Beitangshin's heart. He had a son, an obedient and smart son. He lifted Now from the stool and kissed him hard on the cheek. "Uncle, you're so strange. Why do you always kiss me? If you kiss me again, I'll get angry. I'll really get angry." The little boy frowned and stared at him with puffed cheeks. Where did this strange uncle come from? Did he really not forget to take his medicine? "Silly boy, I'm your daddy." Mikakito laughed in a low voice. Now curled his lips in disdain. "Ske, don't lie to me. Mommy said that I don't have a daddy. I'll get even with your mommy later." Mikakito rubbed his head. "Let's go eat." After 3 years, they were once again sitting around the same table to eat. Beitangshin looked at Zhu Kei, who was sitting across from him. She was seriously helping Now remove the fish bones. He suddenly had an illusion that she had never left and had only gone to the supermarket to buy his and his son's favorite food, that's all. Now didn't like to eat vegetables. He always secretly threw vegetables under the table when his mommy wasn't looking. He secretly glanced at Suzaku, who was carefully removing fish bones, and quietly poked the vegetables from the plate to the table with his chopsticks. Suzaku suddenly looked up at him and said sternly, Now, you can't just eat meat and not vegetables. Eat the carrots and green peppers." "But I don't like it." Now pouted sadly. His big eyes were filled with tears and he looked very pitiful. Mikakito couldn't help but feel sorry for her son. She said, "It's okay if the child doesn't like it. Don't force him." Suzaku threatened him with her eyes and motioned for him to stop talking. Then she stared at Now and said, Now, vegetables can replenish your body's vitamins. If you want to grow taller, you have to eat vegetables and gigai. Do you understand?" "Okay." Now mumbled unwillingly. He picked up the vegetables with his children's chopsticks, frowned, and swallowed them painfully as if he was taking medicine. Mikakito's eyes were full of love. She stroked her son's little head and said softly, Now, do you know why rabbits like to eat carrots?" Now asked curiously, "Why?" "Because rabbits can run fast after eating carrots. Do you want to run as fast as a rabbit? Then you can catch up with Grandma Kimura's little tabby cat," Mikakito said patiently. Now thought about it seriously and nodded firmly. "I want to eat carrots too." "Good boy. Here, eat up all these carrots." Mikakito gave him some carrots with her chopsticks and encouraged him with a smile. Gigai finished the carrots and poked the green peppers on the plate with his chopsticks. He tilted his head and asked, "Where's the green peppers? Why do you want to eat green peppers?" Mikakito's eyes moved and she chuckled. "Eating more green peppers can make you a strong little man. Then you can help mommy work and she won't have to work so hard, okay?" Yes, I want to become a man." The little boy was fooled by her words and happily ate the green peppers. Suzaku was speechless. Eat more green peppers and become a strong little man? Was she bullying the child because he hadn't watched Popeye's cartoon? After dinner, Mikakito took over Suzaku's job and taught Now Chinese. Looking at the father and son happily sitting on the sofa, Suzaku, who was cutting fruit in the kitchen, couldn't help but smile. It wasn't the first time Mikakito bathed a child. He had bathed Xiaobao before, but Xiaobao wasn't as naughty as Now. Now sat in the bathtub and played with the duckling, splashing water everywhere. When he walked out of the bathroom with Now in his arms, he was soaked. Beauty novel Songshu 566. Chapter 382. Suzaka gave him a towel and took Now from his arms. Go and wash up. I'll take Now to bed, she said softly. Her son was lying on the bed, extremely excited. He made a racket for a long time until Vermilion Bird put on a stern face and told him to make a fuss. Only then did he quiet down and obediently close his eyes to sleep. Coming out of her son's room, Vermilion Bird happened to bump into Beitang Xin, who had just finished bathing. His upper body was naked, and there was a white bath towel around his waist. His hair was wet, and the water droplets slid down his hair, sliding over his strong chest and strong waist, disappearing into the mysterious place covered by the bath towel. Her face was slightly hot and she looked away uncomfortably. He strode over to her and lifted her chin with his right hand. Wifey, it's time for us to have a good talk. Her face heated up even more. She bit her lip and said softly, I'm not your wifey. Don't call me that. She put her hands behind her back and secretly took off the ring on her ring finger and held it tightly in her palm. Mikakito's eyes flickered and his smile deepened. He suddenly pulled her left hand out from behind her back and pried her slender fingers apart. He used his fingers to caress her ring finger and chuckled happily. This white mark was left behind by the ring, right? It seems like you've been wearing it for a long time. How long? 3 years? Her eyes flickered and she bit her lip tightly and remained silent. He suddenly pulled out her right hand that was hidden behind her back. She clenched her right hand into a tight fist and refused to let go. He smiled mischievously. What are you hiding in your palm? Is it the ring? The moment he reunited with her, he had already scanned her entire body like a radar. Of course, he knew that she was wearing their wedding ring. She secretly took off her wedding ring. This little trick couldn't escape his eyes. Suzaka looked at his mischievous gaze angrily. Yes, I'm hiding a ring in my palm. Are you happy now? She grabbed his hand and stuffed the ring into his palm. I'll return it to you now. We don't owe each other anything in the future. You can leave now, she said angrily. Mikakito didn't get angry. Instead he chuckled softly. He held her finger and wanted to put the ring back on her finger. We already have a child. How can you say that we don't owe each other anything? Wifey, stop playing and come home with me. The ring slowly slipped onto her finger. She lowered her eyes and looked at the beautiful ring. She said indifferently, How did you find me? Mikakito took out his phone and showed her a photo. This photo was posted on the forum by a female junior high student named Little Sun. The post said that the lady boss of the flower shop is very gentle and beautiful. The boss's daughter, Xiaobao, is very cute. Suzaka looked up at the photo. It was a side profile photo of her carrying Now in the flower shop. Both mother and son were smiling happily. It seemed that Little Sun had secretly taken the photo from outside the window. In the photo, she was wearing black-rimmed glasses and her neat fringe covered her forehead. She looked like a completely different person from before. She didn't expect him to recognize her. He chuckled. I spent a lot of effort to find you. I have to say that you're very good at hiding yourself. Thank you for your compliment, she said mildly. He took a step forward and pulled her into his arms. He stroked her hair and said softly, I'm not here to compliment you. I'm here to take you home. Honey, come home with me. Her face was directly pressed against his moist and naked chest. She couldn't help but tremble. After a moment of silence, she said, No, I like my current life. His eyes narrowed dangerously. Do you like your current life or do you like Akiko? He was jealous when he heard from his son that Akiko had the ambition to become his son's daddy. She pursed her lips. Akiko is just my friend. Even now, she still didn't want to be misunderstood by him. He hugged her even tighter. His hard chest was pressed against her softness. His tone was unbelievably gentle. You like flowers? When we return to Tokyo, I'll get someone to plant the entire garden. Come back with me, okay? It's not about the flowers. Suzaka pushed his chest. The two of them were pressed against each other, making her feel pressured and threatened. Then what's the problem? His purpose of coming here was to bring her and their child home. No matter what problems they encountered, they had to solve them one by one. She looked up at him. I like this kind of peaceful life. Here my heart is peaceful. When we return to Tokyo, you can also live a peaceful life. You're just my wife and Now's mommy. You don't have to worry about anything else. He held her face and tried to persuade her. Her lips curved into a cold smile and she shook her head. No, when we return to Tokyo I'll want more. If I can't get it I'll be very sad. Here I won't want those things so I won't be sad. He stared into her eyes. I can give you whatever you want. She pointed her finger at his heart and looked at him provocatively. What if what I want is your heart? My heart is already yours. Without hesitation, he held her finger and placed it on his chest. His mesmerizing eyes gazed at her face as he said in a deep voice, Do you feel it? It's beating faster because of you. Thump thump. His heart was beating very hard and fast. The chest under her palm was like a flame, burning her finger. She retracted her finger uneasily. What? Is it because of now that you want to bring me back? No. He held her shoulders agitatedly. Silly, I've already fallen in love with you. It's because I love you that I want to be with you. It's not because of now or because of responsibility. What do I have to do to make you believe me? Her tears streamed down her face. She rarely cried. Even when giving birth was so painful, she had never cried. She thought that she would never hear him say that word again in her life. She bit her lip and cried quietly. She didn't sob or complain. She just cried quietly, but it made Mikakito's heart ache. He hurriedly wiped her tears and comforted her gently. Don't cry. Be good. The vermilion bird gradually stopped crying and withdrew from his embrace. She said in a low voice, Give me some time, let me think about it. Rome wasn't built in a day. They needed to sort out their emotional entanglements, and it wasn't something that could be resolved in a short period of time. Mikakito understood this, so he didn't want to force her. Otherwise, it would only drive her further away from him. He smiled. Okay, I'll give you some time to think. But while you're thinking, I want to stay with you. This was the only way he could feel at ease. She rejected him without hesitation. No. If you stay here it will cause gossip. He raised his eyebrows domineeringly. We're husband and wife. What's wrong with staying together? If they want to gossip, let them. She glared at him. Correction, we're not husband and wife yet. How are we not husband and wife? Although we didn't hold a wedding, we've already registered our marriage. She explained, there was too little time at the time. The China embassy in Japan didn't have time to issue a certificate of marriage. We didn't complete the marriage procedures. He smiled smugly. After you ran away from the wedding, I've already taken care of it. So we're now legally husband and wife. Fine. She lost to him. He stroked her hair. So we can rest now. She blushed and slapped his hand away. You'll sleep on the sofa tonight. Mikakito glanced at the sofa in the living room and smiled bitterly. Can you really bear to let me curl up in such a small space? She grunted. If you don't want to, you can stay in a hotel. There's a very comfortable hotel 50 meters from here. He said seriously, I suddenly realized that sleeping on the sofa is pretty good. It's very soft. Wait a minute. I'll go get the quilt and pillow. She turned and walked to her bedroom. The corners of her lips curled up. Mikakito curled up on the sofa miserably. He tossed and turned for a long time, unable to fall asleep. What was this? The warm and fragrant woman was less than 10 meters away, but he was curled up on the small sofa and hugging the quilt to sleep alone. Around midnight, Now staggered out of the children's room. He jumped on the ground and the voice-activated lights on the living room wall immediately lit up. Mikakito woke up in a daze. She looked up alertly and saw Now walking toward the bathroom in a daze. Now, what are you doing? Mikakito got down from the sofa and followed behind her son. Now seemed to be startled by him. His little body suddenly trembled twice and he turned around stiffly. His sleepy eyes were completely opened, and he pouted his little mouth as if he was about to cry. Don't be afraid. It's me. Now be a good boy. Don't cry. Mikakito didn't expect to scare her son. She felt guilty and quickly squatted down to comfort him. Tears were about to flow out of his eyes, but the little guy didn't cry out loud. He said sadly, Uncle, you scared me. It's okay. Don't be afraid. Mikakito stroked his thin back and said softly, Do you want to go to the bathroom? Now pouted and nodded. Uncle will help you. Mikakito picked him up and walked into the bathroom to help him pee. He twisted his little body and said embarrassedly, I can pee on my own. Put me down. Are you sure? Yes. Mikakito put him down. He dragged the stool to the toilet, climbed up and spread his legs. Before he took off his pants, he turned back to warn Mikakito. Uncle, I want to pee. Turn around. Don't peek. Beitang Shin raised his eyebrows in amusement. Sure enough, he turned around and didn't look at him. The sound of water splashing came from the toilet. After the little guy finished peeing, he washed his hands and flushed the toilet. It was hard to imagine that Suzaku had raised her son to be so independent and sensible. He was so sensible that it made his heart ache. Come and see. Songshu 566. Chapter 383. The wind chimes rang and the glass door of the flower shop was pushed open. Hi, welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, what flowers would you like to buy? A handsome man in an apron greeted the customers with a smile as he held a pot of flowers. Ah, you're so handsome. Uncle, are you the helper that Sister Wu Yu hired? The female junior high school students shrieked excitedly with hearts in their eyes. Yes, I'm a new employee. Please take care of me. Mika Kito's handsome face had a warm smile without a trace of displeasure. Why do I feel that uncle looks a little familiar? Xiaoxuan rubbed her nose and searched carefully in her mind. Ah. Chiba exclaimed as she pointed at Beitang Shen and said excitedly, Xiaoxuan, I remember now. This is Uncle Beitang, the one who posted the notice on TV, looking for his wife. The girls were so excited that they were about to go crazy. They rushed forward and asked all at once, Uncle, are you really Mika Kito? Uncle, is Sister Wu Yu the person you're looking for? Uncle, is now your son? Uncle? Beitang Shen had a faint smile on his face. After waiting for them to ask questions, he slowly said, That's right, I am Beitang Shen. The Sister Wu Yu you speak of is my wife. Now is also my son. Oh my God, Xiaoxuan pinched me. I'm so excited that I'm about to faint. Sob, I didn't expect Uncle Beitang to be even more handsome in person than on TV. Sister Wu Yu is so lucky. Now that I look closer, now looks a lot like Uncle Beitang. The girls finally suppressed their excitement. Chiba asked curiously, Uncle, why are you here alone? Where's Sister Wu Yu and now? Who said he's alone? You love-struck idiots just didn't see us. Suzaku came out from behind a tall and lush potted plant. She was wearing an apron and holding a pair of scissors in her hand. It seemed that she was repairing the potted plant. At her feet squatted Xiao. The little fellow held her head with both hands and smiled slyly. Xiaoxuan covered her mouth and giggled. Sister Wu Yu, I'm sorry. We were just too surprised. That's right, big Sister Wu Yu. I didn't expect you to really be Uncle's wife. You lied to us the last time we asked you. Qianyi stuck out her tongue mischievously with a hint of complaint in her voice. Suzaku smiled. You kids don't understand adult matters. She didn't seem to want to stay on this topic any longer. She lowered her head and carefully trimmed the potted plants. The girls were a little embarrassed and didn't know what to say to ease the suddenly stiff atmosphere. Now stuck his tongue out mischievously at them and rushed to Mika Kito's side like a little cannonball. He hugged his slender legs and raised his little head to ask, Uncle, are you really my daddy? Yes. I told you from the beginning that I'm your daddy. I didn't lie to you, did I? Mika Kito picked him up and pinched his pink cheeks. He said with a doting expression, Good boy, call me daddy. Now tilted his head and thought for a moment. Suddenly he shook his head and pouted. No. I'll only call you that if mommy wants me to. Mika Kito was helpless. He glanced at the girls who were staring at him and smiled bitterly. Look, your big sister Wu Yu still doesn't want to accept me. You have to help me put in a few good words in front of her. The girls secretly glanced at Suzaku, who was busying herself behind the potted plants, and secretly made an okay gesture. Xiaoxuan whispered, Uncle, girls like romance. You should do something romantic to make big sister Wu Yu happy. Maybe she'll accept you if she's happy. That's right, Uncle. I have a book here that I can lend to you. One of the girls secretly took out a comic book called The Story of Love from her bag and whispered, This is a comic about love that the popular manga artist, Sensei Kyeko, specially drew for boys and girls. It sells very well. Okay, I'll take a good look at it. Mika Kito cooperatively lowered his voice and hid the comic book under his clothes. Now blinked his beautiful big eyes and moved his red lips, as if he was going to reveal their secret. Xiaoxuan quickly covered his mouth and winked at him. Now you're the best. Don't tell anyone about our little secret, including your mommy. Got it? Now nodded confusedly. Now is such a good boy. Big sister will treat you to candy. Chiba immediately stuffed a piece of chocolate into Now's mouth when Xiaoxuan withdrew her hand. Xiaoxuan deliberately raised her voice and said cheerfully, Uncle, I want to buy lilies. Please bandage them for me. Uncle, I want to buy yellow roses and baby's breath. Uncle, I want to buy... The children were trying to hide something and deliberately shouted loudly. Okay, please wait a moment. Mika Kito's smile widened. He began to understand why Suzaku didn't want to leave this place. The people here were kind and simple. She had formed a bond with them and couldn't bear to leave. Mikakito had been staying at Suzaku's place for 3 days. It was impossible for him to eat and sleep with her every day. He still curled up on the sofa miserably every night. He helped her take care of her business, and she greeted the customers without putting on any airs. She warmly chatted with the customers and neighbors, enthusiastically promoting his ownership. Almost everyone in the town knew that he was Wio's husband, causing Chiu Yi, who had a crush on Vermilion Bird, to be depressed for several days. Their relationship had died before it could blossom. Regarding this, Beitang Shen was very gratified. The weeds and trees surrounding his wife were finally cleared. The day was over. Suzaku mercilessly pushed Mikakito out of her bedroom. She smiled and said, "Good night." Mikakito curled up on the soft sofa. He couldn't let this go on. God knows how long his little woman would throw a tantrum. He had to speed up and make Gigai surrender. Vermilion Bird was lying on the bed. Thinking of a certain someone's deflated expression when he was pushed out of the door, she felt full of joy, and the corners of her lips rose high. She planned to observe him for a few more days. If he passed the assessment, she would follow the steps he gave her. The crisp ringtone of her mobile phone interrupted her wild thoughts. Zhu Kei glanced at the caller ID and put the phone to her ear to answer. "Hongling, what's the matter?" "Sister Suzaku, we found Harada's whereabouts. That guy is too cunning. Qingyan and I have tried to catch him twice but failed. So, we have to ask you to do it yourself." Suzaku frowned. "Where is Harada now?" "In downtown Sapporo. Qingyan is monitoring his hiding place. We're waiting for you so that we can catch him in one fell swoop. Come and see." Hongcha 866.